6 children stand in a ragged line, staring at the floor. They already know they're about to be written off. That's how broken furniture gets written off. And then a level 0 instructor enters the basement, his body barely catching its breath after climbing 3 flights of stairs. An hour ago, this man woke up at a stranger's table. The cold of that stranger's body struck him first. The fingers are long and thin, not a single callus, not a single crack on the knuckles. These aren't his hands. Daniel So opens his eyes and sees a contract with his name on it. The signature at the bottom is already there. The ink has long since dried. Across from him sits a woman with gold epaulets, the headmistress of Haellin Academy. How does he know her name? He doesn't understand. The knowledge just sits in his head like the address of his childhood home. She flips through the papers as one flips through trash. She tosses them aside without looking. They don't have enough hands. He will lead the warm-up for Group E7, the last group in the stream. If they don't reach D rank within a year, they'll be expelled. She says this in a tone used to write off furniture. Daniel looks at his own foreign palms, at the gray robe hanging on his thin body like a coat hanger, an emblem on his chest. Level 0, the very bottom. There's nowhere lower. He stands up, bows exactly 15 degrees, just as his father taught him, just as he had bowed 1,000 times before strangers tatami mats. He says he understands, and asks her to give him these children. For the first time, the headmistress blinks a little more slowly, but she remains silent. She nods toward the door. The hallway smells of stone. The walls are hung with coats of arms and plaques of graduates, golden letters, silver, bronze, SS rank, S rank, a rank. Not a single name below A. Daniel walks past hundreds of names and understands the main thing. This world labels people with letters like weight classes. You can only break free from a weight class. But here, the letter sticks forever. His legs carry him on their own. A stranger's body remembers the way. A staircase down, another one, another. By the 3rd flight, he's gasping for breath. His body isn't just weak, it's broken. His lungs wheeze, his knees buckle. The person who lived in this body before never went further than his bed and a bottle. Daniel presses his hand against the wall. He checks his pulse. 140, from 3 flights of stairs. He smirks. In a past life, he would have told a student like this that he was either sick or lying about warming up. Now he is that student himself. Downstairs is the basement. Low ceilings, dim light, peeling paint. Room E7. The number is written in chalk right on the door. Not even paint, chalk. He opens the door. The room is tiny. The ceiling is streaked with water stains. In the corner, 6 mannequins. 2 are broken. 1 is missing a head, the other an arm. Wooden swords with cracks are scattered across the floor. And in the middle of it all, 6 people. A crooked line. Not because they don't know how, because they don't care. Slumped shoulders, eyes on the floor. No one turns toward the door. Only a girl in the back row lets her eyes drift toward him and immediately looks away. That's how they look at a temporary figure, at someone who won't be there tomorrow. Daniel closes the door quietly. Rule number 1, don't scare them. He steps into the middle. He's silent. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Silence is a tool. If the coach stays silent long enough, the kids start looking. First out of the corner of their eyes, then straight on. After 20 seconds, all 6 of them are staring at him. He introduces himself. Daniel So, their new instructor. Not a word about ranks, not a word about terms. They already know that. He can read it in their backs. First, he approaches the girl in the back row. Tall, straight back even with her shoulders slumped. Hands accustomed to a hilt. A swordswoman. Serin Han. Her voice is steady. Dead. That's what those who have stopped waiting say. He tells her to take the sword. Raise it above her head. Lower it. Raise it. Lower it. The guys snicker. Another pointless warm-up. Daniel doesn't hear them. He isn't looking at the sword. He's looking at her, how her left shoulder blade moves, how her neck tenses, how her right foot turns outward as she swings. He steps in from the side, touches her shoulder blade with 2 fingers. She flinches. It's tight right here. That's why her overhead strike always veers 4 centimeters to the right. That's why she gets caught in every sparring match. The same one, over and over. Serin freezes. She doesn't nod. She doesn't answer. But her eyes widen. 4 centimeters. She always knew the strike veered to the right. 3 years at the academy, and no one told her why. He tells her to breathe into her stomach, not into her shoulders. He places his palm on his own diaphragm. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. The stomach expands. The shoulders don't move. She repeats. 1, 2, 3. She raises the sword. Her shoulder blade doesn't tighten. She strikes the dummy. The dummy splits in half. It doesn't crack. It splits. The top half flies toward the wall with a hollow thud. The room is silent. The guy who was snorting stands with his mouth open. Serin looks at the debris, at the sword, at Daniel. He stands calmly, hands behind his back, as if mannequins split in half every day. Serin quietly asks if she can come an hour early tomorrow. He nods. 1 of 6. A start. Next. A short guy with nervous fingers. He keeps touching his wrist. An elemental mage. Taehyun Ryu. Everyone calls him Hyun. He holds out his hand. A flame the size of a match head on his palm. The guy blushes. Someone looks away. Out of habit. They see this every day. Daniel isn't looking at the flame. He's looking at the boy's chest. The boy holds his breath before activating the power. He takes a deep breath, he clenches, and only then does he release the mana. Daniel tells him to exhale completely, until his lungs are empty, and then to ignite it as he inhales. Hyun doesn't believe him, but he obeys. Exhale, inhale, fire. A ball of flame blooms in his palm, the size of a fist, orange, alive. The boy stares at his hand as if seeing it for the first time. 2 out of 6. Next, Yuna Park. 16, petite, round face, frightened eyes, healer. He asks her to demonstrate a healing spell. She shakes her head. Can't do it in front of people. It doesn't work right. Daniel doesn't press her. Not today. They'll talk privately tomorrow. Yuna blinks. She was expecting a shout, expecting contempt, the kind she'd received from every instructor before him. But he just moves on. 3 out of 6. He asks each one a single question, gives 1 correction. No more, just 1. First day, 1 thing. The rest tomorrow. 40 minutes later, he stands before the formation. The formation is straighter. Not perfect, but straighter. The session is over. Same time tomorrow. And 1 final phrase. They aren't hopeless. He's seen each one, and not a single one is hopeless. He says it calmly, without drama, like the temperature. He turns around, walks out. Behind the door, he slides down the wall onto the cold floor. His heart is pounding at 130. His legs are shaking. 40 minutes standing is the limit for this body. He closes his eyes, and he smiles, for the first time in a foreign body, because he recognized this moment. He had lived through it dozens of times in his past life. You walk into a room full of children who think of themselves as trash, and you walk out of a room where at least 1 child has lifted their head for the first time in a year. 6 children, 1 year. A body that can't climb a flight of stairs without getting winded. No magic, no rank, no gift. Just 20 years in other people's halls, and the knowledge that anyone can become stronger, if there's someone nearby to show them how. The morning began with pain. His whole body ached from yesterday's 4 flights of stairs. Daniel sat up in bed and wiggled his toes. His left calf cramped. He pulled his foot toward him, held it for 10 seconds, let go, repeated. A basic stretch he used to demonstrate to 10-year-olds in their first class. Now he was doing it for himself. He stood up, washed his face with cold water from a pitcher on the windowsill. He looked into the small mirror on the wall. The face was unfamiliar, narrow, pale, dark circles under the eyes, black, thin hair. He was about 34 years old, but looked every 45. His predecessor had been killing this body methodically and slowly. Daniel felt his ribs. He could feel them through his skin. He needed to eat, regularly, 3 times a day, protein, carbs, fats, like an athlete in recovery. Only he wasn't an athlete. He was a trainer in a body that had forgotten how to walk downstairs. He went down to the dining hall, 12 minutes for 4 flights of stairs. The instructor's dining hall was on the first floor of the main building. Long tables, benches, the smell of porridge and something meaty. The room was full. The instructors sat in groups. Daniel immediately saw the system. The senior instructors sat by the window, uniforms with silver and gold insignia, ranks A and above. In the center of the room were the mid-level staff, B and C. The junior instructors sat by the wall, closer to the kitchen, D and E. And right by the door, on a solitary short table, stood a single plate and a single glass, a 0-level table. Daniel sat down. The porridge was gray, the bread was stale, the meat was tough. He ate everything, down to the last crumb. His body needed every calorie. While he was eating, a red-headed girl sat down next to him, young, about 22, an instructor's uniform with a B-rank patch. She wore it casually. The top button was undone. The sleeves were rolled up. She set her plate next to his and sat down as if they'd known each other for 20 years. She introduced herself. Celestia North. Everyone calls her Tia. She said she was the only one in this cafeteria who sat at a 0-level table. She said the previous Daniel So came here once a week and left silently after 5 minutes. She asked if this Daniel So would be more interesting. Daniel looked at her, a direct gaze. No pity, no mockery, just curiosity. He replied that he didn't know yet, that the first day wasn't over yet. Tia snorted and started eating. 15 minutes later, he had learned more from her than he would have in a week from the paperwork. Tia turned out to be the kind of person who says whatever she thinks and doesn't waste time on politeness. She told him that Group E7 was a dumping ground. They send people there who are too embarrassing to expel right away. Kids from families who pay for tuition or from families with some kind of connections. They keep them for a year. They pretend to teach them. They expel them. Everyone's happy. They don't assign an instructor to E7. They send instructors to E7. There had been 3 in the last 2 years. 1 left on his own. The second transferred. The third was that Daniel, who drank himself to death in the dorm. Tia said this without emotion, like the weather. Daniel listened, chewed on bread, memorized it. Tia asked why he had stayed behind after class yesterday. Daniel didn't ask how she knew. Apparently the walls had ears at the academy. He replied that he was taking notes. Tia looked at him strangely. She said that in the 3 years she'd been working there, not a single instructor below A rank had ever taken written notes on the students. Daniel finished his water and replied that that explained a lot. He arrived at Hall E 7:20 minutes before the start. Serin was already there. She was standing in front of the remains of yesterday's dummy. She was looking at them. Daniel entered quietly. He didn't say hello. He walked over to the rack with the training swords. He picked one out. He checked the balance. He checked the weight. He turned to Serin and said they would start with the stance. Serin nodded. They worked for 20 minutes before the others arrived. Stance, foot placement, weight distribution. Daniel didn't touch the sword. He stood nearby and spoke. Left foot 2 centimeters back, knee slightly bent. Weight on the front third of the foot, not on the heel, never on the heel. Serin moved silently, precisely. She corrected herself quickly. He could see that she was memorizing every word, not just listening, memorizing with her body, a rare quality. In 20 years, he'd met people like this maybe 5 or 6 times, people who learn not with their heads, but with their muscles, for whom doing it right once is enough for the body to remember forever. The rest arrived. Hyun first. Behind him were 2 guys Daniel hadn't had time to assess in detail yesterday. Karo, 20 years old, shield user, broad-shouldered, slow, rank E. Behind him was Ren Lucas, 17, spear user, skinny, nervous, rank E. Yuna was the last to arrive, petite, round face, eyes downcast. Daniel started with a warm-up, but not the kind they were used to. No running in circles, no push-ups, no arm swings. He started with breathing. All 6 of them formed a circle. Daniel stood in the center. He told them to breathe. Just breathe. Inhale for a count of 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Repeat. Ren snorted. Karo raised an eyebrow. Hyun obediently closed his eyes. Serin breathed evenly from the start. Yuna tried but lost her rhythm. Daniel walked over to her, stood beside her, breathed with her rhythm, gradually slowing his inhalation. She adjusted. After 3 minutes, all 6 were breathing in sync. The room fell silent, only breathing. 6 pairs of lungs, and 1 pair in the center. Daniel felt the air in the room change, not magically, chemically. When a group of people breathes together in unison, cortisol levels drop. That's science, not magic. But the effect is the same. After the breathing exercise, he moved on to individual work, 10 minutes each. Serin was practicing her stance. Hyun was working on activation on the inhale. Daniel approached Karo, a shield bearer, a big guy. The problem was immediately apparent. Karo was holding the shield at arm's length, far from his body, like a wall between himself and the world. Because of this, he lost his balance with every strike. Daniel told him to hold the shield closer, to himself. Karo objected, saying that's how he'd been taught, that the shield should be far away, that there should be space for maneuvering between the shield and the body. Daniel asked who had taught him. Karo replied that it was a D-rank instructor last year. Daniel nodded. Then he asked Karo to take a stance, shield far away, just as he'd been taught. He walked over and pushed the shield with his palm, not hard. Karo staggered. Daniel asked him to hold the shield closer, elbow to his ribs, the shield as an extension of his body. He pushed again. Karo stood like a rock. The guy looked at his hand, at the shield, at Daniel, and said nothing. But Daniel saw it. He saw that very expression flash across the 20-year-old's eyes, the one he'd been coming to the dojo for 20 years to see. A spark, small, the first, but alive. Ren turned out to be more difficult. A spearman, 17 years old, nervous. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from fear. Daniel handed him a spear, asked him to strike the dummy. Ren struck, weakly, awkwardly. The tip missed the center by 20 centimeters. Daniel didn't correct his technique. He looked at Ren and asked if he'd been sleeping well lately. Ren flinched. The others turned to look. Ren replied that he was sleeping fine. Daniel shook his head. Shaking hands, an unfocused gaze, paleness. It wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. Ren hadn't slept properly for at least 3 days. Daniel said that Ren wouldn't train anymore today. He said that Ren was going to his room, to lie down, to sleep. Tomorrow he'd come back and they'd work. Ren stood there with his mouth open. In 3 years at the academy, not a single instructor had ever sent a student to sleep instead of training. It was unthinkable. Training is sacred. Missing training is a disgrace. Daniel repeated it. Sleep. Ren looked at the others. They were silent. Ren slowly placed his spear in the rack and walked out. Daniel turned to the remaining 5. He said that the most important part of training is recovery. That the body grows not when you work, but when you rest after work. That sleep is not a weakness, but a weapon. 5 pairs of eyes looked at him. There was something new in those eyes. Not trust. It was too early for trust. But interest. A lively, genuine interest. After class, he went up to his room. 18 minutes for 4 laps. A new record. A minute faster than yesterday. He caught his breath. Opened his notebooks. Added notes to each page. Serin. Stance corrected. Memorizing with her body. Outstanding muscle memory. Hyun. Activation on the inhale is working. The ball of flame is stable. Needs to work on endurance. Karo. Shield to the body. Accepted. Stubborn but not stupid. Ren. Exhaustion. Don't train until he's had a good night's sleep. Find out the cause of the insomnia. Yuna. Didn't show any ability. Don't push her. work through safety measures. The sixth sheet belonged to a guy he'd barely noticed yesterday. Min So, 18 years old, rank E, support. His gift was so weak that he didn't show it during yesterday's session. Daniel didn't get to him today. Tomorrow, 20 minutes each. He did the math. 6 students, 20 minutes each, 2 hours, plus warm-up, plus group work, 3 hours. His body could handle standing for a maximum of an hour, so he needed to work on himself. At the same time, he jotted it down on a separate sheet, a program for himself. Walking, stairs, stretching, breathing, 3 meals a day, 8 hours of sleep. In a month, this body should be able to last 3 hours on its feet. In 2 months, climbing stairs without getting out of breath. He looked at the list. He smiled. A trainer who can't train for more than an hour. In his past life, that would have been laughable. Here, it was a condition of the task. There was a knock at the door, quietly. He opened it. Yuna, standing in the hallway, small, hands pressed to her chest, eyes downcast. She said she wanted to show her gift, but only to him, without the others. Daniel nodded, stepped back. She entered, stood in the middle of the tiny room, raised her palms. A glow appeared on them, faint, flickering, greenish, healing mana. She trembled like a candle flame in the wind. Yuna stood with her eyes closed. Sweat beaded on her forehead. 5 seconds later, the glow faded. She opened her eyes. They were filled with tears. She said that was it, that this was all, that this was the limit. Daniel looked at her, nodded her hands, at her. 16 years old, a healer's gift that barely glows, in a world where healers are as necessary as air, and where a weak healer is worse than no healer at all. Because they won't call for none, but they'll call for a weak one, and he won't be able to handle it. He sat down on the bed, to be at the same level as her. He said the glow was steady, that it flickered not because it was weak, but because she was afraid. That when she closes her eyes and tenses up, the mana flows in spurts, like water through a pinched hose. Yuna blinked. Daniel said they would start tomorrow, not with mana, with her hands, with how she holds her palms, with how she breathes, with how she stands. Yuna asked if he thought it would work. Daniel replied that he didn't think so, that he knows. She stood there for another second, then she bowed, awkwardly, too low, and left. Daniel closed the door, sat back down, jotted down a note on Yuna's sheet. The gift is more stable than she thinks. The problem isn't the mana, the problem is fear. Work through the body, through the breath, through getting used to it. Don't rush. He put down his pen, looked out the small window. It was getting dark outside. The second day. 6 sheets of paper on the table. 6 children who, for the first time in a long while, had come to class voluntarily. His body ached, his legs were buzzing. But inside, it was warm. The warmth of work. He knew that feeling. It meant the process had begun. On the 3rd day, Ren came, well-rested. The circles under his eyes had lightened slightly. His hands weren't shaking. Daniel asked him to take the spear. Ren struck the dummy. The tip passed 5 centimeters from the center. Not 20, like the day before yesterday. 5 centimeters. Daniel said nothing. He just nodded. Ren understood on his own. Daniel could see it in his face. The guy looked at his spear as if it had changed. But the spear was the same. He had changed. 1 night of normal sleep. 5 centimeters instead of 20. That was arithmetic Daniel could explain. Muscles recover during sleep. Coordination depends on sleep. Reflexes depend on sleep. Everything depends on sleep. In his old world, every other coach knew that. Here, no one knew it. The first week went by the clock. Morning, wake up, stretching, down the stairs, breakfast, the gym, 3 hours of work, 20 minutes individually with each one, group breathing warm-up, evening, climbing the stairs, notes, sleep. Every day Daniel added 1 detail to the program, not 2, 1. On Tuesday, he gave Serin an exercise for moving in a stance, forward, backward, 200 repetitions. She did 300. On Wednesday, he started working with Min So, that very sixth student whom Daniel had barely noticed. Min turned out to be a support. His gift was called Echo. He could copy someone else's spell for a split second, a weak copy, about 10% of the original. A useless gift by the Academy's standards. The instructors hadn't even included him in combat training before Daniel. Daniel watched as Min activated Echo. The boy copied Hyun's flame, a tiny spark. It went out in a second, Daniel thought. 10% of Hyun's fire. Useless. But what if Hyun became stronger? 10% of a powerful spell isn't useless anymore. And what if Min could copy not just one spell, but 2 in a row, or 3? Weak copies, but of different types. Fire, shield, healing. Support isn't about the power of the strike. Support is about the team working as a single unit. Daniel looked at Min, and for the first time, saw in him not just the sixth member. He saw in him the link, the glue, the one who binds the other 5 into a single machine. He told Min that starting tomorrow, he would train in pairs, with each member of the group, one at a time, not on his own, together. Min blinked. In 3 years, no one had ever paired him up. On Thursday, the first clash occurred. Daniel was leading the session when the door opened without a knock. A man in a C-rank instructor's uniform entered the hall. Tall, broad shoulders, a displeased expression. He looked down at Daniel and said he needed the hall, that his D3 group had a schedule for that hour. Daniel stood before him, a head shorter, in a gray 0-level robe, skinny, pale. He calmly replied that the E7 group had the room until the end of the hour, that he had checked. The instructor smirked, said that the 0-level schedule didn't count, that the hall was needed for real training. 6 E7 students stood behind Daniel, silent. Serin gripped the hilt of her sword. Karo stepped forward. Daniel raised his hand. Without turning, the gesture meant to stand still. All 6 froze. They had known him for 3 days, but they already understood this gesture. Daniel looked at the sea and said that the session would end in 20 minutes, that if the instructor needed the hall, he could wait in the hallway. The instructor flushed. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Daniel stood calmly, hands behind his back. He wasn't threatening. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there. And there was something about that stance that the C-rank instructor couldn't break, not because Daniel was strong, but because Daniel was absolutely certain of his right to stand there. The instructor turned and walked out. He slammed the door. Daniel lowered his E. He turned to the group. He said, "Let's continue." Karo exhaled. Hyun rubbed his neck. Yuna looked at Daniel as if she were seeing him for the first time. It was a small moment. A 0-rank instructor had stood his ground against a C-rank instructor. In a world where rank determines everything, this was almost a rebellion. Daniel knew there would be consequences, but that was for later. Right now, he had 20 minutes left for training, and he wasn't going to waste a single one. By the end of the first week, he had put together a complete program, 6 individual notebooks, a specific regimen for each, wake-up time, bedtime, meals, number of reps, type of exercises, one personal rule. Serin, don't strike with a tense shoulder. Hyun, don't hold your breath before casting a spell. Karo, shield to the body. Ren, 8 hours of sleep, no less. Yuna, breathe with your eyes open. Min, work in pairs, always in pairs. He handed out the notebooks on Friday morning. 6 thin notebooks, handwritten in someone else's small handwriting, each signed with a name. They stood there, flipping through the pages, in silence. Hyun finished reading first. He looked up. He said he'd never had anything written just for him before. Daniel replied that now he did. Yuna pressed the notebook to her chest. Serin folded hers and tucked it behind her belt, carefully, like a weapon. The second week began with a new problem. The C-rank instructor whom Daniel had barred from the hall filed a complaint. Daniel learned about it from Tia at breakfast. She came in with 2 bowls of porridge and set one in front of him. She said that Instructor Garn had filed a report with the deputy director, that a 0-level instructor was overstepping his authority. He was using the gym beyond his scheduled hours, conducting non-standard training sessions, using an unknown method. Tia listed the points of the complaint, counting them off on her fingers. Daniel ate his porridge. He listened. When she finished, he asked what unknown method meant. Tia explained that all training programs at the academy are approved by the Council of Instructors. There is an official list of permitted exercises. Breathing techniques are included in it, but only magical ones, related to mana control. What Daniel was doing wasn't on the list. Normal breathing, diaphragmatic, without mana, without a gift, just air, just the lungs. And that wasn't approved. Daniel set his bowl aside. He thought for a moment. Then he asked Tia if there was a rule prohibiting breathing exercises without mana. Tia thought for a moment. She replied that there wasn't. There was a list of permitted exercises, but no list of prohibited ones. Daniel nodded. It was a loophole, a narrow one, but sufficient. 2 days later, he was summoned to the deputy director's office, a small office on the second floor. Sitting at the desk was a man in his 50s in an A-rank uniform, graying temples, a neat beard, the look of a bureaucrat. He didn't offer Daniel a seat. Daniel sat down anyway. The deputy director placed Instructor Garn's complaint in front of him. He asked what kind of method he was using. Daniel replied that it was breathing exercises, work on posture, technique correction, an individualized training regimen. The deputy director raised an eyebrow. He asked where Daniel had learned this. Daniel hesitated. It was a question he couldn't answer truthfully. He said he'd studied on his own, that he'd read old books, that he'd tried things out on himself. The deputy director looked at his gray robe, at the zero-level emblem, at his thin arms, and in his gaze, Daniel read everything he needed to know. 0 level, no gift, no rank, reads old books, experiments on himself. The deputy director decided he was dealing with an eccentric, a harmless eccentric. He said that until the E7 group's results showed any deviations, the complaint would be dismissed. But if there were deviations, Daniel nodded, stood up, bowed, left. In the hallway, he exhaled. First shot, missed, but the next one would be more accurate. By the end of the second week, he saw the first real result. Not a single moment, not a flash, a system. Group E7 was moving differently, not each on their own, together. Serin began her breathing exercises on her own, without a command. Hyun stopped holding his breath before casting a spell. His fireball grew from the size of a fist to the size of a head. Karo held his shield close to his body and stopped staggering when struck. Ren slept for 8 hours and hit the center of the dummy with his spear 7 times out of 10. Min worked in pairs with everyone. His echo had become more stable, not stronger, more stable. He could hold the copy for 3 seconds instead of 1. And Yuna started bandaging scrapes, not other people's, her own. After every training session, Daniel would deliberately give her small tasks. Put together a first aid kit, check if there were bandages, clean the scratch on Hyun's arm. She did it with clenched teeth, with white-knuckled fingers, but she did it. Every day a little calmer. Daniel didn't praise her for it. He just said, "Good." 1 word, quietly, and moved on. That "good" was worth more than any reward. Yuna knew it. Daniel knew that she knew. The 3rd week, Daniel stood in the hall and counted. 21 days since waking up. His body had grown a little stronger. He now climbed the stairs to the 4th floor in 9 minutes instead of 12. His pulse dropped below 120 after the climb. He ate 3 times a day. His ribs no longer jutted out so clearly. Trivialities. But trivialities he understood better than anyone else in this world. The body isn't built in a rush. A body is built through habit, day after day, spoonful by spoonful, step by step. His students were growing faster, because they were young, because their bodies craved the right kind of exertion, like dry earth craves water. They just needed to be shown where to flow. On Monday of the 3rd week, he held his first team training session. Not individual, team. All 6 of them, together. The task was simple. Serin attacks the dummy. Karo covers her left flank. Hyun amplifies her strike with fire. Ren controls the distance with his spear. Min mirrors Karo's shield and positions it on the right. Yuna stands behind them and monitors the group's condition. She doesn't heal. She simply observes. She reports who is tired, who has frozen up, who has lost their breathing rhythm. The first attempt was chaos. Serin struck before Karo had taken his position. Hyunu fired at the wrong mannequin. Ren tripped over the shaft of Min's spear. Min lost his concentration, and his shield copy went out after half a second. Yuna stood there, pale-faced, and didn't say a word. Daniel watched, silently, hands behind his back. When the chaos ended, he said one word. Again. They repeated it. Worse. A third time. Even worse. A fourth. Karo collided with Serin. Both fell. Hyun burned Ren's sleeve. Min sat on the floor and covered his face with his hands. Daniel stopped the training. He sat on the floor in front of them, right on the cold stone. They stood. He sat. It was intentional. A coach who sits lower than his student does not exert pressure from above. He speaks as an equal. Daniel asked which of them knew what a team was. Silence. He asked one by one. He asked if they had ever fought together. Not side by side, together. Karo replied that during sparring, it's every man for himself. Hyun added that it's the same during group drills. Everyone is evaluated separately. Individual rank, individual score. Daniel nodded. There, that's the problem. They'd had been taught for 3 years to be loners. 6 separate people in one hall isn't a team. It's 6 loners who get in each other's way. He said he'd start from the beginning, not with fighting, with movement. Tomorrow they would just walk, together, in unison, until they learned to sense each other without words. On Tuesday they walked, for 2 hours, around the hall, in circles, 6 people, 1 pace, 1 step. Serin in front, Karo behind her, Hyunwoo, Ran, Min, Yuna last. Daniel stood in the center and clapped his hands. Rhythm, clap, step, clap, step. After an hour, they stopped losing their rhythm. After an hour and a half, Daniel stopped clapping. They walked on their own, in silence. 6 pairs of feet, 1 sound. Karo would later say it was the strangest activity of his life. Ren would say that for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel anxious in the hall. Yuna wouldn't say anything. But for the first time in 2 weeks, she would smile. On Wednesday, Daniel added a second element, walking with stops. He raised his hand. All 6 stopped at the same time. He lowered it. They walked. He raised it. Stop. If even one person lost their rhythm, they started the lap over. The first hour was agonizing. Min fell behind. Hyun ran ahead. Ren flinched at every movement of Daniel's hand as if struck. By the end of the second hour, they were stopping in sync. Not perfectly, but in sync. Daniel saw what was happening. They were beginning to hear each other, not with their ears, with their bodies, their peripheral vision, the rhythm of their breathing. It was called team coordination. In his world, it was the foundation of any team sport. Here, it didn't exist. Here, every hero was a star. 1 fighter, 1 rank, 1 glory. A team was something for the weak, for those who couldn't do it on their own. Daniel knew that wasn't true. He'd known it for 20 years. A team isn't a crutch for the weak. A team is a multiplier for the strong. On Thursday, he combined marching with combat drills. They marched in formation. At the signal, Serin stepped forward and struck the dummy. Karo covered her back. Hyun provided cover fire. Min copied the moves. Ren controlled the flank. Yuna counted the seconds before and after the strike, out loud. 1, 2, 3, strike. 4, back. 5, formation, rhythm. The chaos subsided, not because they had become stronger, but because they had become predictable to one another. Karo knew Serin would strike on the count of 3. Serin knew Karo would step in on 2. Hyun knew his fire was needed between 2 and 3. Min knew his copy was needed on 4 when the group retreated. Ren knew his zone. Yuna knew her rhythm. 6 people, 1 organism. Daniel stood by the wall and watched. And for the first time in 3 weeks, he allowed himself to think that this might work. On Friday, what he had been waiting for and fearing happened. An internal sparring match with Group D3. Instructor Garn had arranged it personally. It was revenge. Daniel realized this when he saw the schedule on the bulletin board. Group E7 versus Group D3. Open sparring. Hall number 3. Main building. Not the basement. A large hall with bleachers, with windows, with light. Tia found him by the board. She said that Garn wanted public humiliation, that D3 was a strong group, 8 people, all D rank, 2 of them close to C, against 6 E ranks from the basement with a 0-level instructor. Daniel read the schedule. His face was calm. He asked if he could refuse. Tia shook her head. Internal sparring matches are mandatory. Refusal means automatic defeat, recorded in every student's personal file. Daniel nodded. So no refusal. He gathered the group an hour before the sparring match, in their basement hall. They already knew. Ren was pale. Yuna was clutching the hem of her robe. Min was sitting on the floor. Karo stood against the wall with his arms folded. Hyun was nervously snapping his fingers. Serin stood in the center, back straight, sword at her belt. She was the only one who looked calm. Daniel stood before them. He said that in an hour, they would go out to spar against D3. He said that D-3 was stronger than any of them individually. He said it was a fact, not an insult, a fact. Ren swallowed. Daniel continued. He said he didn't know if they would win. He said victory wasn't the goal of this fight. There was only one goal, to work as a team, to do what they'd been doing all week, to move in rhythm, to stop together, strike on the count of 3, retreat on 5. Yuna counts. Min holds the copy. Karo holds the flank. Hyun breathes. Ren sleeps before the fight. Daniel fell silent. Then he added, he said they weren't obligated to win, but they were obligated not to be afraid, because there's nothing to be afraid of. 2 days ago, they did something no other group at the academy does. They worked together. Serin turned to him. There was no fear in her eyes. There was hunger. Hall number 3 was large, high ceilings, stone floor. 24 spectators sat in the stands. Instructors, a few upperclassmen. Garn stood by the wall with a smug smirk. The D3s lined up on their side of the field. 8 people, uniforms with D-rank insignia, confident faces. They looked at the E7s with the same gaze one uses when looking at training dummies. Daniel stood behind the line. A 0-level instructor was not allowed on the sparring field. He stood by the wall, in a gray robe. The referee signaled the start. The D3s moved forward, broadly, confidently, each on their own. 8 loners. Daniel watched. E7 stood still. They didn't move. Yuna began to count, quietly, in a whisper. 1, 2, 3. On 3, Serin stepped forward. A strike, a straight punch, from above, without a shoulder lock. The blade of the training sword sliced through the air and struck the shield of the first D-rank fighter -3's shield. He staggered. Didn't fall, but he staggered. A D-rank staggered from an E-rank strike. The stands fell silent. 4. Serin stepped back. Karo covered her. Shield to the body. Elbow to the ribs. The D-rank's strike hit his shield and went wide. Karo stood his ground. Hyun fired a fireball between Karo and the attacker. Not for damage, for distance. The D-rank recoiled. Ren struck with his spear at the flank. It hit. Not hard, but it hit. Min copied Karo's shield and placed it to the right of Yuna. Yuna kept counting. The fight lasted 7 minutes. E7 didn't win. They lost. 4 out of 6 were knocked out by the end. Serin lasted the longest. Karo stepped in front of her at the last moment and took the blow that was meant for her. Ren hit with his spear 3 times out of 5. Min held his spear for 4 seconds at a time. Yuna didn't lose count once. When the referee declared D3 the winner, the hall roared. But it wasn't roaring about the victory. It was roaring because E7 had lasted 7 minutes. Group E versus Group D. 7 minutes. Not 30 seconds as expected. 7 minutes of organized combat, with coordination, with scoring, with cover, with flanking strikes. Garn wasn't smiling. His group had won. But they had defeated a group that was supposed to go down in 30 seconds in 7 minutes. And everyone sitting in the stands saw it. Daniel approached his group after the fight. They were sitting on the floor. Karo was holding his shoulder. Ren was breathing heavily. Yuna was bandaging Hyun's scraped arm. Serin was standing. She was staring at the floor. Daniel stood in front of them. He said they had lost. They nodded. He said they had lost fairly. They raised their heads. He explained. 7 minutes of coordinated combat. Yuna hadn't lost count. Karo shielded Serin not because he was ordered to, but because he felt the blow. Hyun had breathed correctly throughout the entire fight. Ren landed 3 out of 5. Min held the copy for 4 seconds. They did everything he asked. They worked as a team. The results will come. Not today, but they will come. Because they already know how to do something that no one else in this academy knows how to do. They know how to work together. Karo looked away. Ren swallowed. Min clenched his fists. Yuna stopped bandaging and froze. Serin looked up. She looked at Daniel and said that tomorrow she would come in 2 hours early. Daniel nodded. Hyun said he would too. Karo muttered that he would as well. Ren nodded silently. Min got up from the floor. Yuna quietly said she would too. 6 out of 6. Daniel turned and headed for the exit. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall again. His knees were shaking. 3 hours on his feet, a new limit. But he was smiling, because he saw what no one in the stands saw. He saw that in a month, this group wouldn't be losing to D ranks in 7 minutes. In a month, this group would be winning. After the sparring match with D3, people at the academy started talking. Not loudly, in whispers, in the dining hall at lunch, in the hallways between classes. Group E7 had held out for 7 minutes against D3. It wasn't a sensation, it was a curiosity. Curious enough to be mentioned, minor enough to be quickly forgotten. But Daniel wasn't going to let them forget. He was going to give them a reason to remember. The 4th week, a month, 30 days since he opened his eyes in a foreign body. His body was now climbing the stairs for 7 minutes. His pulse after the climb was 110. He had gained 3 kilograms. His ribs were no longer visible. Trivialities, but the right kind of trivialities. His students were growing faster. Serin practiced her strike 300 times a day. Her shoulder blade no longer locked up. Her body had learned. Now every strike was precise, right on target, with diaphragmatic breathing, with proper form. Daniel measured the speed of her strikes with a stopwatch, an artifact he'd begged from Tia. Serin was 40% faster than she had been a month ago. 40%, without a single new spell, without artifacts, without potions, just proper technique. Hyun controlled a fireball the size of 2 fists, stable, dense. He had learned to activate the spell on the inhale and extinguish it on the exhale, a steady cycle. Inhale, fire. Exhale, stillness. His mana was being spent 30% more efficiently, because he had wasting energy on holding his breath. Karo stood like a wall, shield close to his body, center of gravity low. Not a single D-rank student could budge him during training sparring matches. Ren slept for 8 hours. His spear hit its target 8 times out of 10. The tremor was gone. His eyes had grown calm. He began to think before striking, rather than flinching out of fear. Min worked in pairs every day. His echo lasted 6 seconds. He learned to switch between copies. Hyun's fire, Karo's shield, Ren's spear. 3 different gifts, weak copies, but 3, in a row. And finally, Yuna. Yuna started bandaging others, not just after training, during it. Daniel deliberately placed her next to the pairs during sparring. Someone would get a scrape. Yuna would go over, wash it, and bandage it. Her hands were still shaking, but she went over, every time, without being told. At the start of the 4th week, Daniel asked Yuna to use her gift for the first time. Not in the back room, in the hall, in front of everyone. Hyun got a minor burn on his wrist during training, a small one, a red spot. Daniel looked at Yuna. He didn't order her, he just looked. She understood. She walked over to Hyun, raised her hands, a green glow, faint, flickering, but she didn't close her eyes. She looked at the burn. She breathed, Inhale for 4, exhale for 6, just as he had taught her. The glow became more even, not brighter, more even. The burn faded. It didn't disappear. It faded. Yuna lowered her hands. She looked at Daniel. He nodded. Good. One word. Yuna returned to her place, and Daniel noticed. She wasn't holding on to the edge of her robe. For the first time in a month, her hands hung freely. The group's results were becoming apparent not only to him. Tia came to one of the sessions on Wednesday. She stood by the wall. She watched. Daniel didn't mind. Let her watch. She watched as 6 E ranks moved across the hall in synchronized formation. As Serin struck the mannequin, and it cracked with every blow. As Karo intercepted the training projectiles Daniel threw at the group from different sides. As Hyun set up walls of fire in even lines. As Yuna counted the 6 with ran after a sprint and told him when to stop. After the session, Tia approached Daniel. She stood before him in silence. Then she said one sentence. She said that Serin hits like a minus rank. Daniel replied that Serin hits like Serin. Tia was silent for a moment. Then she asked if she could come again. Daniel said she could come whenever she wanted. Tia nodded and left, but she stopped at the door. She turned around. She said she'd been practicing martial arts for 12 years, that she was B rank, that in 12 years, not a single instructor, including her own, had ever corrected her stance, and that when she looked at Serin, she realized for the first time that her own stance was crooked. Daniel replied that if she wanted, he could take a look. Tia stood in the doorway. Her expression was complex. Pride was battling something else. Then she said she'd think about it. She left. Daniel knew she'd come back. Not today, but she would come back. People who see their own mistakes can't live with them for long. At the end of the 4th week, a notice arrived. A white envelope with a gold seal. Official Academy letterhead. First year internal tournament. In 2 weeks. All groups from F to C. Mandatory participation. Team format. 6 on 6. Daniel read the paper in his tiny room. 2 weeks. Team format. He looked at the stack of notebooks on the table. 6 notebooks, written into the last page. He took out a blank sheet of paper and started a new plan. A tournament plan. 2 weeks of preparation. Every day was scheduled down to the hour. First week, strengthening individual skills. Second week, team tactics. He wrote until midnight. His hand had grown accustomed to someone else's small handwriting. The lines fell evenly. In the morning, he gathered the group. He showed them the notice. Their expressions changed. Ren turned pale. Min lowered his eyes. Karo clenched his jaw. Hyun rubbed his wrist. Yuna pressed her notebook to her chest. Serin didn't move. Only her eyes narrowed. Daniel said that in 2 weeks they would enter the tournament, that they would fight as a team, 6 against 6, that their opponents would be groups D and C, that on paper they didn't stand a chance. He paused. Then he said that the papers lie, that the papers don't know how Karo holds his shield, how Hyunu breathes, how Ren hits the target, how Min ties them all together, how Yuna calculates, how Serin strikes. The stats know their rankings. The stats don't know them. Ren raised his head. Min straightened up. Karo nodded. Once. Hard. Hyun stopped rubbing his wrist. Yuna loosened her grip on the notebook. Serin turned to the group. She said 2 words. "Let's work, Sensei." Daniel nodded. The first week of training was tough. Not cruel. Tough. Daniel knew the difference. Cruelty breaks you. Toughness builds you. He increased the workload, not by half, by 20%, a rule he'd learned in his 3rd year as a coach. More than a 20% increase per week, and the body starts to break down. Less than 10%, and there's no progress. 20, exactly, for everyone. Serin was striking 400 times. Stance, strike, step, strike, step, strike. Daniel stood nearby and counted. He didn't correct her. She no longer needed corrections to her strike. Her body knew. He corrected something else, the tempo, the rhythm between strikes, the pause between the swing and the strike, those fractions of a second that distinguish E rank from C rank. It wasn't, not mana, time, timing. Serin listened and did as she was told, silently, intently, with that hunger in her eyes that Daniel saw in champions, in those who don't just want to win, in those who need to. Hyun was working on the volume of fire, not the size, the density. Daniel explained the difference. A large ball is impressive but wastes mana. A small, dense ball passes through a shield. Hyun trained to compress the flame, like a fist. Inhale, squeeze, exhale, hold. Karo practiced transitions, from defense to attack, from attack to defense, without pause. Shield forward is defense. Shield to the side is a strike with the edge. Karo was slow, but his slowness was his strength. He moved heavily and inexorably, like a door closing. Daniel told him not to try to be fast, to be inevitable. Karo smiled for the first time in a month. Ren worked on accuracy. 10 strikes out of 10 to the center. Then 10 strikes on the run. Then 10 strikes from a pivot. Every miss meant 10 repetitions of the basic stance. Not a punishment, a reset. Daniel knew that after a miss, the body tenses up. The fear of error makes the next strike worse. The basic stance released the tension. It returned his body to the starting point. Ren realized this on the third day. He stopped fearing misses, and he started hitting the mark. Min trained with each of them, for an hour. He copied every gift, Hyun's fire, Karo's shield, Ren's spear. He couldn't copy Serin's gift because she didn't have an active gift. Her strength lay in her muscles and technique. But he could copy healer Yuna's strike, a faint green flash, which healed nothing, but which blinded for a second. Min discovered this by accident. He copied Yuna's glow, aimed it at the wall. The green flash struck the stone. It didn't damage it, but it was bright, very bright. Daniel saw it and noted it down. A tactical element, blindness for a second. In battle, a second is an eternity. Yuna trained her endurance, not magical, physical. Daniel made her run, slowly, at a jog, around the hall. 10 laps, 20, 30. A healer must be the last to fall, because if the healer falls, everyone falls. Yuna ran, panting, flushing, but she ran, a little longer every day. The second week. Tactics. Daniel drew diagrams on the floor with chalk, positions, control zones, retreat lines, intersection points. The 6 of them stood around and looked at the white lines on the stone. None of them had ever seen a tactical diagram. At the academy, combat was taught simply. Hit harder, move faster, invest more mana. Tactics were for generals, not for students. Daniel explained 3 formations. First, the wedge, Serin in front, Karo and Ren on the flanks, Hyun behind Serin, Min behind Karo, Yuna in the rear. An offensive formation, for a breakthrough. Second, the ring, Yuna in the center, all 5 around her. A defensive formation, for defense. Third, the wave. Serin attacks, retreats. Hyunmu attacks, retreats. Ren attacks, retreats. Karo holds the line. Min copies whoever is attacking. Yuna heals whoever has retreated. 3 attacks, one after another. Wave. They practiced each formation for 2 hours a day. Wedge, ring, wave. Wedge, ring, wave. By the end of the second week, the transition between formations took 3 seconds. Daniel gave the command with a single word. Wedge, and they shifted. Ring, shifted. Wave, shifted. 3 seconds, no fuss, no collisions. 6 people, 1 body. The day before the tournament, Daniel gathered the group one last time. Evening, basement hall, dim light, debris from mannequins in the corner. There were already 8 of them. They stood before him. 6. He looked at them and saw what wasn't written in any of their personal files. Serin stood straight, shoulders back, left shoulder blade free. A month ago, she was a shadow of her older sister. Now, she was Serin Han. Hyun stood calmly, hands at his sides, not nervous. A month ago, he'd been squeezing out a spark the size of a match. Now his fire was dense and precise. Karo stood with his legs wide apart, shield at his hip, ready to raise it in half a second. A month ago, he'd staggered from a light shove. Now only C ranks could budge him. Ren stood straight. His eyes were clear. His hands were steady. A month ago he hadn't slept for 3 days and missed by 20 centimeters. Now he hit the center on the run. Min stood next to Karo, close, like a partner. The Haellin Academy tournament hall held 2,000 people. Today it was half full. The first-year internal tournament wasn't the event of the year. It was routine, a progress check, a formality. But a formality with consequences. The results went into personal files. They influenced rank reviews. They determined who would be kept and who would be expelled. Instructors sat in the stands. Several members of the Academy Council, upperclassmen who were bored, and one man in a gray zero-level robe on the farthest bench of the upper tier. Daniel sat there not because he wanted to hide, but because from there he could see the entire field. For 20 years, he had watched the competitions from the stands, and for 20 years, he'd chosen a spot from above. A coach doesn't see the fight through a fighter's eyes. A coach sees the fight like a chessboard, from above. The draw determined the order. 16 groups, 4 rounds. Group E7 ended up in the bottom half of the bracket. First opponent. Group E2, 6 E ranks, the weakest after E7. Daniel read the scoreboard and understood. The organizers had placed them there on purpose. The 2 weakest teams against each other in the first round. One group would advance and be crushed in the second. The spectators would get a nice contrast. Everyone's happy. Daniel looked at the field. E2 came out first. 6 people. An uneven formation. Heads bowed. They looked just like E7 a month ago. Lost children. Without faith. Without a plan. Then E7 came out. Daniel leaned forward. They were marching in formation. Not perfect, but in formation. Serin in front, Karo on the right, Ren on the left, Hyun behind Serin, Min behind Karo, Yuna in the rear. A wedge. They came out in a wedge. Someone in the stands snorted. Someone squinted. Formation. The E-rank group came out in formation. It was unusual. The referee gave the signal. E2 moved forward, scattered, each on their own. Yuna began to count, quietly. Her lips moved. 1, 2, 3. Serin stepped forward. A strike. The first E2 fighter was knocked out of bounds. 4. Karo stood up. His shield took 2 hits. Hyun fired. Dense. Small. The ball passed between 2 E2 fighters. Both flinched to the sides. Ren struck with his spear. 5. Min copied Yuna's glow. A green flash. Bright. 2 of the E2 fighters squinted. A moment of blindness. Serin struck a second time. The third fighter was behind the line. Ring. Daniel mouthed the word. No one heard him. But down below they regrouped. Yuna in the center, 5 around her. The remaining 3 from E2 attacked. The blows landed on Karo's shield, on Ren's spear, on Hyun's wall of fire. Yuna counted. Wave. Serin forward. Strike. Back. Hyun forward. Fire. Back. Ran forward. Spear. Back. 3 strikes. 3 seconds. 3 fighters behind the line. The fight ended in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The arena was silent. Not because it was impressive, because it was incomprehensible. 6 E-ranks had just taken apart 6 other E-ranks like a machine. No shouting, no chaos, with precision, with formation, with tactics. The referee declared the victory. The E7s turned and left the field in formation, in the same wedge formation. Daniel sat in the upper stands, hands on his knees, his face calm. Inside, he was burning. Second round. Group D5, 6 D ranks, stronger than the E7s on paper. On paper. Daniel watched as the D5s warmed up at the edge of the field. Confident, relaxed. They had just seen the E7 versus E2 fight and weren't impressed. E had beaten E, as expected. Nothing special. The referee gave the signal. The D5s moved forward, quickly, aggressively. The first strike landed on Serin. She took it on her sword. She held her ground. But she was knocked back a step. D rank is D rank. The difference in strength was real. Karo shielded her. The shield took the second strike. the third, the fourth. Karo stood firm, feet shoulder-width apart, center of gravity low. He didn't waver. Hyun fired. The D5s dodged, quick, experienced. Ren struck with his spear, a miss, his first in a week. Daniel watched from above. Ren froze. Fear returned. One strike, and it's all over. No, Daniel watched. Ren stood, breathing. Inhale, exhale. Basic stance. He reset himself to 0, without a cue, without coach, on his own. Ren struck again. Hit. D5 lost their first fighter. The stands stirred. An E rank had knocked out a D rank. It wasn't impossible, but it was unusual. The fight lasted 6 minutes. E7 lost Min in the 3rd minute. A D rank strike passed through his weak copy shield and knocked him behind the line. 5 against 5. Then they lost Ran. 4 against 4. Yuna was counting. Karo was holding. Hyun was on fire. Serin was slashing. By the 5th minute, Serin had found her rhythm. Daniel saw it from above. He saw how her body stopped thinking and started acting. Stance, step, strike, step, strike. Every strike was 4 centimeters more precise than any D rank on the field. She knocked out 2 in 30 seconds. Hyun finished off the 3rd with fire. Karo took the final blow on his shield and shoved the opponent with its edge. He flew over the line. Victory. The hall roared. It didn't murmur, it roared. Group E7 had defeated Group D5. 6 E ranks against 6 D ranks. This was no longer a rarity. It was an event. In the stands, the instructors exchanged glances. Garn sat in the 3rd row with a stony expression. His Group D3 was in the upper half of the bracket. If E7 made it through the 3rd round, they would meet in the 4th, in the final. Daniel wasn't looking at the stands. He was looking at his students. They were leaving the field. Min was limping. Ren was clutching his side. But all 6 were marching in formation, a wedge. Even the knocked out ones, even with bruises. Formation. Daniel clenched his hands on his knees, not out of nervousness, out of that feeling he experienced every time his students did something he hadn't asked them to do. Formation after the fight. He hadn't taught them that. They'd decided on their own. Round 3, Group C8, 6 C ranks. This is where the real wall began. C rank isn't just stronger, it's a different level. Mana is denser, reflexes are faster, technique honed over years. Daniel knew his group couldn't win a straight fight. Not now. Maybe in 6 months, but not now. So they needed a strategy. He couldn't go down to them, couldn't give them a hint. Tournament rules prohibited the instructor from communicating with the group between rounds. They were on their own. 6 kids, with 1 month of training, against the machine that had been training for 3 years. The referee gave the signal. The S8S didn't wait. They went right at him, with force. The first blow crashed into Karo. The shield held, but Karo was sent flying 2 meters, S rank, a different weight class. Serin attacked in response. Her strike was precise, fast, technically perfect. The C rank took it on his forearm and didn't even flinch. Technique versus strength. Strength won. But Daniel saw something else. He saw the C rank's face. Surprise. For a split second. Because the E rank struck so hard that he had to block. Not to dodge, to block. It was a compliment. A combat compliment. The fight was short. 4 minutes. E7 lost. Karo was the first to go. Then Min, then Ren. Hyun lasted the longest. His dense fireballs forced the C ranks to dodge. Not to block. Dodge. That was a compliment too. Yuna stood until the very end. She counted. She healed whoever she could. Her green glow flickered over Hyun's scrape when he was knocked out. She didn't run away. She didn't hide. She stood and healed until the referee stopped the fight. Serin was the last one standing. 1 against 4 C ranks. She stood in the stance Daniel had taught her 5 weeks ago. Left foot back, knee bent, weight on the front third of the foot, shoulder blade free, sword in front of her. The 4 C ranks stood opposite her. Not a single one attacked first. 1 second, 2, 3, Daniel understood why. They respected her stance. They saw that this E-rank girl stood the way masters stand, and for a single second, they hesitated to strike. Then, they struck. Serin blocked the first blow, the second, the third got through. She fell to one knee. The sword was knocked from her hand. The referee stopped the fight. Shock. The hall was silent, but it was a different kind of silence, not indifferent, attentive. 1,000 people had just witnessed an E rank forcing 4 C ranks to pause for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of respect, more precious than any trophy. The tournament ended for E7 in the semi-finals, 3rd place out of 16 groups. For a group that a month ago couldn't hit a mannequin with a spear, it was a miracle. For Daniel, it was the beginning. He descended from the upper stands. 12 minutes. The staircase was long. He found his team at the exit from the hall. They were sitting on the floor, tired, battered, but not broken. Serin was standing against the wall, staring at the ceiling. Daniel walked over, stood in front of them, told them they'd placed 3rd. Karo grumbled that they'd lost. Daniel nodded, said they'd lost to a C-rank team in the 4th minute. A month ago, they'd lost to a D rank at the 7-minute mark. And today, they beat the D ranks. He said he saw progress. That progress doesn't lie. That if the trend continues, in 2 months, the C ranks won't be a wall for them. Ren looked up. He asked if it was true. Daniel replied that he wasn't lying, that it was pointless. Ren snorted. He almost smiled. Daniel told everyone to go rest. 8 hours of sleep. Tomorrow, they'd review the fights. Every strike, every mistake, every second. They nodded, got up, left. Yuna lingered. She approached Daniel. She said quietly that during the fight with S8, she had treated Hyun's abrasion, in front of everyone, on the field, not in a cubbyhole, not in an empty hall, on the field in front of 1,000 spectators. Daniel looked at her. She stood straight, hands at her sides, eyes dry. He said one word. "All right?" Yuna nodded. She turned. She left. Daniel stood in the empty hallway, alone, in a gray robe, his legs aching with fatigue. And he thought about how a 16-year-old girl who, a month ago, had been afraid to reveal her gift, had today healed a comrade under the gaze of 1,000 people. That was worth more than any 3rd place. The next morning, Daniel found a note on his door. Official Academy letterhead, a summons to the headmistress. Today, 10 o'clock. He carefully took the note down, folded it, put it in his pocket, went down to the dining hall. Tia was already sitting at his table. 2 breakfasts. She slid a plate toward him, said she'd heard about the summons, said that after yesterday's tournament, the Council of Instructors had held an emergency meeting. Tia spoke quickly and quietly. 3rd place in Group E7 had elicited 3 reactions. First, admiration from the junior instructors. Second, irritation from the senior ones. Third, suspicion from the council. Tia said that Master Dine personally raised the issue of testing Group E-7 for the use of banned stimulants. Daniel chewed on a piece of bread. He asked who Master Dane was. Tia looked at him as if he had asked who the son was. Corvus Dane, SS instructor, a legend at the academy, the continent's best teacher for 20 years. His graduates make up 1/3 of Haellin's active heroes. His method? Selection. He takes 100. He breaks 99. He graduates 1. But what a 1. Tia said that Dane takes E7's success as a personal insult, not because they performed well, but because they performed well from E rank, from the material that Dane would have written off on the first day. If his rejects become fighters, then his method isn't the only one. And if his method isn't the only one, then all those he weeded out over 20 years weren't rejects. They were his mistake. Daniel finished his water. He stood up. He thanked Tia for breakfast. He went to the headmistress's office. The office was the same. A dark desk, gold epaulets, the same tired woman. But today there was another person in the office. He was standing by the window. Tall, thin, gray hair slicked back, a face carved from stone, gray eyes, cold. An SS instructor's uniform, gold epaulets on both shoulders. Corvus Dane. He didn't turn around when Daniel entered. The headmistress nodded toward a chair for Daniel. He sat down. She placed a sheet of paper in front of him, the results of the internal tournament. Group E-7, third place. Note: recommendation from the Council of Instructors to conduct a test for the use of prohibited stimulants and artifacts. Daniel read it. He looked up. The headmistress asked if he could explain his group's results. Daniel replied that he could, that the explanation was simple: proper technique, proper breathing, proper sleep, proper nutrition, team coordination, a month of daily work. The headmistress listened. Dane stood motionless by the window. Daniel continued. He said that none of his students had taken stimulants, that he was ready for any test, that his students could take a Manhwa test right now. The headmistress looked at Dane. He finally turned around. He looked at Daniel for a long time, silently. Then he spoke. His voice was low, steady. He said he had seen the E7 match at the tournament, that the swordswoman's technique was atypical for the academy, that the team's formation was non-standard, that he wanted to know where Daniel had gotten this from. Daniel met his gaze. The SS instructor's gray eyes were intense, physically. Daniel felt that pressure like wind in his face. But he had stood for 20 years before the parents of champions, before federal commissions, before people who decided the fate of his dojo with a single signature. He had learned to stand his ground. He replied that he had developed the method himself, that the foundation was working with the body, not with the gift, with the body, muscles, breathing, coordination, sleep, recovery. Dine listened. His expression didn't change. Then he asked one thing. He asked why, in 200 years, no one before Daniel had thought of this. Daniel hesitated. Then he answered. He said they had thought of it, long ago, before the Great Awakening, when people didn't have gifts and they trained only the body. He said that after the awakening, everyone had forgotten, because why train the body when there is magic? The office fell silent. The headmistress looked at Daniel. Dane looked at Daniel. Daniel sat upright, hands on his knees. Dine turned to the headmistress. He said an investigation needed to be conducted, for the sake of order. The headmistress nodded. Dine left. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at Daniel. He just left. The headmistress waited until the door closed. Then she spoke quietly. She said that Daniel should be careful, that Dine was not the kind of person to forget. Daniel thanked her. He stood up. He bowed 15 degrees. He walked out. In the hallway, he exhaled. His hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from adrenaline. An SS instructor, a man who was worth an army. And that man had just remembered his name. The check was conducted the next day, a magical scanner. Each student was checked for 10 minutes, blood for stimulants, mana for traces of artifacts, the body for modifications. 6 of them stood in line outside the medical office. They were nervous. Yuna was trembling. Karo was clenching his fists. Serin stood calmly. The results came back 3 hours later, clean, all 6 of them. No trace of stimulants, no trace of artifacts, no trace of modifications. 6 healthy teenagers with E ranks, who 3 weeks ago couldn't hit a mannequin with a spear. Daniel received a copy of the results in an envelope stamped by the medical department. He put it in his desk. He didn't throw it away. He knew he would need that envelope more than once. After the checkup, Tia came to see him that evening. No tea, no plates. She just came. She stood in the doorway, and she said what she wanted. She wanted him to look at her stance. Daniel nodded. He said tomorrow, after class. Tia nodded. She left. But she turned in the doorway and said one more thing. She said that Dane had summoned all his students to his office that evening, the ones who had defeated C8 in the tournament finals. Group A-1, the Academy's best group. He summoned them and ran them around the training ground for 3 hours. No breaks, no water. 3 hours. Some of them came out with blood on their hands. Tia said that's how Dane trains, through overexertion, through pain, through fear. Daniel listened. His face didn't change, but inside something tightened, cold, familiar. He'd seen coaches like that in his life. Coaches who confuse toughness with cruelty, who break people because they don't know how to build them up, and who, when they see someone building themselves up, start breaking them down even harder, to prove that only the broken become strong. Daniel closed the door, sat down at the table, opened his notebook, wrote a single name on a blank page: Corvus Dane. Underneath, he wrote 2 words: primary threat. The following week, the aftermath of the tournament began. First, good. Spectators started coming to Group E7, students from other groups, 2 or 3 people every day. They stood by the wall of the basement gym. They watched. Daniel didn't chase them away, let them watch. Second, bad. Serin received a letter from home. She read it in the gym after practice. Daniel saw her fingers turn white, her lips tighten. She folded the letter, put it away, started training. Punch, punch, punch. Harder than usual, more vicious. Her left shoulder blade tightened. For the first time in 3 weeks, Daniel approached. He didn't ask about the letter. He placed 2 fingers on her shoulder blade. She froze, exhaled. Her shoulder blade relaxed. He removed his hand. He said when she was ready to talk, he would be ready to listen. Serin nodded. She didn't turn around. She continued. A blow, steady, right in the center. Daniel returned to his seat. He knew what was in that letter, not the content, the essence, family, comparison, older sister, that very S rank, the pride of the family. Serin took 3rd place in the freshman tournament, and someone in the family wrote to her that 3rd place was a disgrace for a Han, or something like that. Daniel had seen this 100 times. A child comes home with a silver medal. A parent asks, why not gold? And silver turns to lead. The 3rd consequence of the tournament came a week later, an official notice. The E7 group's rank review is scheduled for the end of the 2nd month, in 4 weeks, standard procedure. But usually, reviews happen every 6 months. The fact that it was scheduled a month after the tournament meant one thing. Someone at the top wanted to see the numbers, in black and white. Not tournament matches where you can chalk it up to luck. Official tests, individual ones, for every parameter. Mana, physical strength, speed, reflexes, technique. Daniel read the notice. 4 weeks, that's enough. If they keep up the same pace, if no one breaks down, if Dane doesn't interfere, a lot of ifs. But that was all he had. Daniel started working with Tia on the 3rd day after her request. She came to the basement gym after class, in her training uniform, no patches, hair pulled back, a serious expression. She wasn't joking. She wasn't being sarcastic. For the first time since they'd met, Tia North was quiet. Daniel asked her to assume a fighting stance. She stood. B rank, 12 years in martial arts, academy instructor. Daniel walked around her. Slowly, he looked. Her right shoulder was 2 centimeters higher than her left. Her right foot was turned out 15 degrees. Her hips were clamped. Her breathing was shallow, chest-based, exactly the same as any fighter in this world. Only with Tia, it had been cemented by 12 years of incorrect practice. Erase and rewrite. Harder than with children, much harder. He told her 3 things: shoulder, foot, breathing. Tia listened. Her face changed. He saw her go through the stages: skepticism, irritation, recognition, acceptance. She was smart, and she was honest with herself. 10 minutes later, she was standing in a new stance, uncomfortable, unfamiliar, correct. Daniel asked her to strike the dummy. Old stance. She struck. The dummy swayed. The new stance. She struck. The dummy cracked. Tia stood and looked at the crack, then at Daniel, then back at the crack. She said one word: 12 years. Daniel understood. For 12 years, she had been striking incorrectly, and no one had told her. Because she was talented, because even with a crooked stance, she was B rank, and everyone thought that was her ceiling, that B was her maximum. But B wasn't the maximum. B was the result of 12 years of incorrect technique. With the correct technique, her ceiling was higher, much higher. Tia understood that. She stood in silence. Then she said she'd come tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Tia started coming every evening, after her classes, after his classes. They worked for an hour, sometimes 2. Stance, breathing, striking. slowly at first, then faster. Tia was a different kind of student, not like Serin, who learns with her body. Tia learns with her mind. She needed to understand why the shoulder had to be level, why the weight on the front third of the foot, why exhale on the strike and not inhale. Daniel explained. Biomechanics, leverage, center of gravity, muscle chains, words that didn't exist in this world. He translated them into the local language, but the essence remained. Science, not magic. The science of how the body moves. Tia absorbed it. She took notes. In the evenings, they sat in his little room and analyzed the training sessions. Hers, his. Her students, his. Tia asked questions, lots of them. Sharp ones, precise ones. Daniel answered, sometimes at length, sometimes with a single word. Something developed between them that Daniel hadn't felt in a long time. Professional equality. She wasn't his student. She was a colleague who was learning. The difference was enormous. A student listens. A colleague argues. And in those arguments, ideas were born that Daniel alone would never have found. Tia knew this world, knew its rules, its traditions, its limitations. She became his interpreter, a bridge between science from another world and the reality of Illyria. At the same time, Daniel worked with Serin on her problem, not with the technique, with the letter. He didn't ask about the content. He waited. On the 5th day after the tournament, she arrived an hour early, alone, standing in the hall, not training, just standing. Daniel entered, sat on the floor. She spoke, told him. Her older sister, Haellin Khan, S rank, the pride of the family, an academy graduate with honors, Haellin's heroine, a first-class swordswoman, portraits in the family home, golden letters on the academy wall, Haellin Han, and beneath her, nothing. Serin Han, E rank, not on the wall, not in the portrait, in the kitchen, a silent shadow in the corner of the family dinner. The letter was from his mother. Her mother wrote that she had heard about the tournament, that 3rd place wasn't bad, for an E rank. Then she wrote that Haellin was already an A rank at her age, and that if Serin remained an E rank swordswoman, perhaps she should consider another profession. Because Han is a swordsman's surname, and it must be borne with dignity. Daniel listened silently, hands on his knees. Serin spoke calmly, no tears, no tremor in her voice. She had learned not to cry a long time ago. When she finished, he was silent. 10 seconds. Then he asked one thing. He asked why she picks up a sword. Serin didn't understand the question. He repeated it. Not why she's a swordswoman, not because of her family, not because of her surname. Why does she, Serin Han, personally pick up a sword every morning? She was silent. For a long time, then she answered quietly. She said that when she holds the sword correctly, when her stance is right, when the strike is smooth, in that moment, she isn't the younger sister. She isn't a disgrace to the family name. She isn't a shadow. In that moment, she is herself. Daniel nodded. He said that this is what it's all for, that everything else is noise, that letters are noise, that the family name is noise, that the only thing that matters is that moment, when she takes the sword and it becomes part of her arm. He said he sees that moment every day, that this moment does not belong to the Han family name. It belongs to Serin. She stood, back straight, shoulders level, shoulder blades relaxed. Then she nodded. Once. She took the sword, began training. The strike was even, right down the center. No tension. Daniel stood up, brushed the dust off his knees, went to prepare the hall for the main session. Behind him, he could hear the steady rhythm of strikes, one after another. No pauses, no missteps, like a metronome. End of the 2nd month, rank review, the official procedure. The Great Hall, a panel of 5 instructors, 2 A ranks, 2 B ranks, 1 SS, Dane. He sat in the center, gray eyes, a stony face. Daniel stood by the wall, a gray robe, level 0. His students came out one by one. Each was tested on 6 parameters: mana, physical strength, speed, reflexes, technique, combat effectiveness. Karo went first, a shield mage. The tests lasted 10 minutes. A scanner mage recorded the metrics. Karo stood, shield held close to his body. He took the hits from the test spells, blocked, held his ground. The results flashed on the crystal. Physical strength, D. Reflexes, D. Technique, C. Combat effectiveness, D. Overall, D rank. Karo Bane, formerly E, now D. The commission took note. Dane didn't move. Hyunwoo was next. Fireball, dense, stable. The mage scanner recorded mana density, 40% higher than 2 months ago. Mana consumption, 30% lower. Same fireball, less mana, more fire. Result, D rank. Ren, spear, 10 strikes, 10 hits. On the run, from a turn, standing still, D rank. Min, echo, 6 seconds, 3 copies in a row. Fire, shield, spear. The committee exchanged glances. Min was still an E. His gift was too weak for a promotion, but the 6 seconds and 3 copies were noted. Yuna, a healing glow, steady, no flickering, with her eyes open. She healed the test cut on the mannequin. Not completely, but evenly, consistently. Result, E+, not D, but not the same E as 2 months ago. Yuna returned to her place. She looked at Daniel. He nodded. Good. Serin was the last to go out. She stood before the committee, sword in hand, perfect stance. Daniel watched from the wall. 5 instructors at the table, one of them SS rank. Everyone was looking at the 17-year-old girl in an E rank uniform. A physical strength test. A strike against the measuring crystal. Serin struck. The crystal registered the impact. A number lit up. The hall fell silent. 2 B-rank instructors. Rank instructors exchanged glances. 1 A-rank stepped forward. Dane didn't move, but his eyes narrowed slightly. The number on the crystal corresponded to an average C-rank strike. Not a low C, an average one. Speed test. Serin moved across the training ground. Dodge, lunge, step, turn. The artifact stopwatch recorded it. C rank. A technique test. A series of strikes against moving dummies. Every strike to the center. No deviation, no hesitation. The committee gave her a score. A rank. A rank technique. The girl had an E rank. The committee calculated the total score. Daniel saw the A rank instructor's pencil stop on the paper. He saw him reread the numbers. Recalculate. Lift his head. Look at the headmistress sitting off to the side as an observer. Announce the result. Serin Han. New rank. C. Not D, C. Skipping D entirely. The hall buzzed. The instructors began to talk. Someone stood up. Dane sat motionless. He looked at Serin. Then he slowly shifted his gaze to Daniel, by the wall, in a gray robe. Their eyes met. Dane didn't nod. He didn't frown. He just looked. And in that gaze, Daniel read what he feared most. Not anger, not envy. Interest. The cold, calculating interest of a predator who has seen something new and is deciding whether to destroy it or make it his own. The newspapers reported it the next day. Tia brought 3 copies to the dining hall. She laid them out in front of Daniel. Headlines. A rank jump at the Haellin Academy. A sword from E to C in 2 months. A miracle under review. Daniel read. Not a single article mentioned the instructor's name. Serin Khan. 17 years old. Younger sister of heroine Haellin Khan. The surname Khan. The surname. Not the coach. Not the method. The surname. The journalists decided it was genetics, blood, an inherited talent that awakened late. Daniel folded the newspapers. He handed them to Tia. He asked if Serin was upset that they were writing about her as the younger sister. Tia shook her head. She said that Serin doesn't read the newspapers, that Serin had come to the gym an hour early that morning and trained, as usual. Daniel finished his water. Good. But others had read the papers. On the third day after publication, a man came to the basement gym. Not a student, not an instructor. A man in his 40s, plain clothes, expensive fabric, a silver pin on his lapel, the emblem of the Heroes Guild. He introduced himself, said his name was Leighton Gray, that he was a representative from the Guild's recruitment department, that he wanted to speak with the instructor of Group E7. Daniel stood before him in a gray robe. Leighton Gray looked at him and tried to hide his confusion. A zero-level instructor. No rank, no gift. Leighton had expected someone else. He recovered quickly. A professional. He smiled. He said that the Guild was interested in Serin Han, that a rank at 17 with such growth potential is a valuable asset, that the Guild is ready to offer early enrollment, a scholarship, an A-rank mentor, full support. Daniel listened. His face was calm. Inside, he was cold. An asset. He called her an asset. Daniel replied that Serin was his student, that she would make the decision, that he would pass on the offer. Leighton nodded. He left a business card with gold embossing. He left. Daniel turned the card over in his fingers. He placed it on the table. He didn't throw it away, but he didn't pass it on to Serin either. Not yet. She needed more time, not to advance in rank, to grow from within. On the fourth day after the announcement, a second guest arrived in the hall. A woman. Tall. Light hair tied in a bun. A long coat. An invisible weight on her shoulders that Daniel recognized immediately. That's how people walk who are carrying something heavy inside. Every step takes effort. She entered quietly. She stood by the door. Daniel was leading the class. He turned. He looked at her. She didn't introduce herself. She just stood there and watched as 6 students moved around the room. How they breathed, how they struck, how Yuna counted, how Min copied, how Karo held. She watched for 20 minutes, then she left, without a word. Daniel didn't stop her. He saw her eyes. There was something broken in them, something that had once been whole and now lay in shards. He knew that look. Athletes after an injury. Not a physical one, the other kind. When it's not the body that breaks, but what's inside. When you know you can, but you can't. When there's a wall between you and what you're capable of. A wall you can't see but feel with every fiber of your being. He asked Tia about it that evening. He described the woman. Tia turned pale. She said it was Ariana Vale. Daniel didn't recognize the name. Tia explained. S rank, active hero, or former active. A year ago, her team died in a rift, all 4 of them. She survived. She made it out. Since then, she hasn't been able to enter a single rift. Panic at the threshold. The Guild keeps her in reserve. Officially, she's undergoing treatment. In reality, she's been written off. Tia said that Ariana lives in Haellin, alone. That none of her fellow heroes visit her. That in the world of heroes, there are no broken ones. Either you stand or you're gone. Daniel listened, nodded, thought. Ariana came back 2 days later, standing at the door again, silent again, 20 minutes again. She left. The third time, Daniel approached the door after class. She was already walking down the hallway. He called out. She stopped, didn't turn around. He said that if she wanted, she could do more than just watch. She stood with her back to him, her shoulders tense. Then she answered, quietly. She said she wasn't a student, that she was S rank, that she didn't need a 0-level instructor. Daniel replied that he wasn't offering an instructor. He was offering the hall. Silence. A place where she could just stand with a sword in her hand. No fissures, no team, no pressure. Just stand. Ariana was silent, for a long time. Then she said she'd think about it. She left. Daniel returned to the hall. Serin was standing inside. She was looking at the door. She asked who that woman was. Daniel replied that she was someone having a hard time. Serin nodded. She didn't ask any more questions. Ariana came a week later, in the morning, before classes started. The hall was empty. Daniel was sitting on the floor, writing in a notebook. She walked in. She closed the door. She stood in the middle of the hall. She held a sword in her hand. Not a training sword, a real one. The blade glowed with a faint blue light. An S-rank artifact weapon. Rank artifact weapon. She stood there, holding it, just holding it, not raising it, not putting it away. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. He sat on the floor and wrote, as if no one were there. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. Ariana stood there, the sword in her hand. She was breathing, evenly, heavily, but evenly. After 20 minutes, she lowered the sword, turned to Daniel, said that before, when she picked up the sword, she used to hear their voices. A command. The 4 of them, the ones who had died, said she couldn't hear them now, said it was quiet here. Daniel looked up from his notebook. He looked at her. He replied that silence was a good start. Ariana stood there. Then she nodded. She turned to the mannequin. She raised her sword. She struck. The mannequin didn't split in two. It vaporized. The upper half vanished. The lower half melted. The stone floor beneath it cracked within a 2-meter radius. S-rank. Ariana lowered her sword. Her hands were shaking. Not from weakness. From something else. Daniel stood up. He walked over. Not to her, to the remains of the mannequin. He looked. Then he said calmly, he said he needed a new mannequin, and that if she was going to come, she should bring her own. Ariana looked at him. For a second, 2. Then something appeared on her face. Not a smile. A shadow of a smile. A ghost of what had once been lightheartedness. She said she would bring them. She left. Daniel stood before the melted remains of the mannequin. S-rank. 1 strike. The mannequin had vaporized, and she can't enter the rift, because the problem isn't strength, not the body, not the sword. The problem is the door, the threshold, that moment when you have to take a step inside, and in the 4 voices she hears at that threshold. Daniel sat back down on the floor, opened his notebook, started a new page. Ariana Vale. S-rank. Trauma. Loss of the team. Panic at the threshold of the rift. Don't work with force. Work with the threshold. Small steps. Like with Yuna. Yuna was afraid of blood. Ariana is afraid of the door. The principle is the same. The body remembers fear. The body can be retrained. But only slowly. Only gently. Only if someone who isn't afraid is standing nearby. Daniel was working on 3 fronts. In the morning, Group E7. Tia in the afternoon. Ariana in the evening. His body protested. 6 hours on his feet a day. For this body, that was the limit. He started nodding off at the table. Woke up with ink stains on his face from falling forehead first onto his notes. Tia was the first to notice. She came into the dining hall in the morning, looked at his face, at the circles under his eyes. She said he looked like his predecessor, only without the bottle. Daniel replied that he was fine. Tia sat down across from him, folded her hands, and said the very phrase he himself repeated to his students every day. She said that rest is not a weakness, that the body grows not when you work, but when you rest. Daniel looked at her. Tia looked back, without mockery, with that calm stubbornness he already knew. She wouldn't back down. Daniel smiled, the first smile in a long time that resembled his real one, the one from his past life. When his own words came back to him from his students, he said she was right, that he'd take a day off, just one. Tia nodded. She said she'd lead the class for him, that she'd memorized his method, breathing, stance, one-on-one, 20 minutes each. Daniel hesitated, then he nodded. For the first time in 2.5 months, he'd entrusted his students to someone else, not because he was tired, because Tia was ready, because she was the first person in the world who understood his method not as a set of techniques, but as a system. She could teach. She was already teaching. She just didn't know it yet. Daniel spent the day in the tiny room. He slept, he ate, he stretched. He looked out the small window. He thought about his students, about Tia, about Ariane, about Dana, about a world that measured people by letters and didn't see them as people, and about himself, about the man who died in the alley by the bus stop, who woke up in a stranger's body on the other side of the universe, and who, for some reason, ended up exactly where he was needed. It wasn't a coincidence. He felt it. He knew. Someone had brought him here. Someone had chosen him specifically. But who? And why? He didn't know, not yet. But he knew something else. He knew that tomorrow he would return to the gym, that 6 students would be waiting, that Tia would ask how he slept, that Ariana would come with a new mannequin, and that somewhere on the top floor of the academy, an SS instructor with gray eyes would be thinking about him, to decide, to break or to claim. And Daniel knew that neither of these decisions would change what he was doing, because he was a coach. By the 3rd month, everything had accelerated. Group E7 had ceased to be Group E7. Formally, they were still listed under that index. In reality, 4 out of 6 were D ranks. 1 was C. Only Min remained E. But Min had changed the most. His echo lasted 10 seconds. He copied 4 gifts in a row. Hyun's fire, Karo's shield, Ren's spear, Yuna's glow. Weak copies, 10% of the original, but 4 in a row, without a break. Daniel saw in this what no one else did. Min wasn't a fighter. Min was a conductor. His role wasn't to fight. His role was to bind the group into a single whole, to fill the gaps, to strengthen the weak points. And when Daniel explained this to him, when he said that his gift wasn't useless but unique, that no one else at the academy had one like it, Min stood and looked at his hands, and Daniel saw what he had seen hundreds of times, the moment when a person first understands why they exist. Ariana came every morning, for 3 weeks. She stood with her sword. She struck the dummies. She said nothing. Daniel didn't rush her. He didn't speak. He just stayed nearby. He sat on the floor. He wrote in his notebook. Sometimes he said something brief, about breathing, about stance, little things. She listened, or didn't listen. He didn't check. At the end of the 3rd week, he took the first step. He asked Serin to come in the morning, early, before Ariana. When Ariana arrived, Serin was standing in the hall, training, sword, stance, strike. Ariana froze in the doorway. She hadn't expected anyone. Daniel was sitting in the corner. He didn't say anything. Serin turned. She looked at Ariana. She bowed 15 degrees, just as Daniel had taught her, and went back to training. Ariana stood there, for a second, 5 seconds. Then she entered, stood next to Serin, raised her sword. They trained in the same hall, in silence, side by side. Not together, but side by side. It was intentional. Daniel knew that Ariana wasn't afraid of the rift. She was afraid of being next to someone in battle, because last time, everyone who was nearby died. Standing next to Serin was the first step. A small one, a safe one. Just 2 people in the same hall, nothing more. But for Ariana, it was like touching a door she hadn't been able to open for a year. A week later, Daniel added Hyun, then Karo, then the rest. Every morning before the main training session, Ariana stood in the hall with the E7 group. 6 people, and her. 7 swords, 7 pairs of breaths. She didn't train with them. She was just there. Sometimes she watched. Sometimes Yuna would come up to her after practice with a towel and water. Ariana accepted them in silence. Yuna left in silence. A small ritual. No words, no explanations. Daniel saw Ariana's face change, millimeter by millimeter, like a stone mass cracking. Not crumbling, cracking. Something alive was showing through the cracks. By the middle of the 3rd month, an invitation arrived. Not an envelope, not a form. A courier in the uniform of the Heroes Guild, hand-delivered. Serin Khan was invited to an exhibition sparring match as part of the Academy's annual review. Opponent, Lauren Dine, rank A, senior class, Master Corvus Dine's favorite student. Daniel read the invitation. He understood. This wasn't a sparring match. It was a message, from Dine, to him, personally. My best student against your best student. Prove that your method works, or I'll prove that it doesn't. Daniel showed the invitation to Serin. She read it. Her expression didn't change. She asked when. In 3 days. She nodded, said she'd be ready. Daniel looked at her. C rank against A rank. A 2-rank difference. It's like pitting a novice against a master athlete. Winning is almost impossible. Almost. He told Serin they wouldn't change the program. 3 days isn't enough time for a new technique. 3 days is time to hone the old one. Stance, strike, breathing, Footwork. What she'd been doing every day for 2.5 months, only cleaner, more precise, faster. Serin stood up, took the sword, began. 3 days. Daniel spent them by her side. Every training session, every strike, every breath. He didn't say much. A word here, a word there. Footwork, shoulder, breathe. One more time. Serin worked, silently, intently, with that hunger in her eyes. On the second day, the others joined them. Without being asked, they came into the gym, stood by the wall, watched. Hyun, Karo, Ren, Min, Yuna. Tia came after lunch, stood next to them. Ariana came in the evening, stood by the door, watched. The whole gym, everyone watched as Serin struck the dummy, time and again, precisely, right in the center, without deviation. Sparring day, the great hall, the same one used for the tournament, but today it was full, 2,000 seats, all occupied. Instructors, students, the Academy Council, the headmistress, representatives of the Heroes Guild, reporters. Word of the swordswoman who had jumped a rank had spread throughout the city, and when it became known that she would face Master Dane's best student, the hall filled up in an hour. Daniel sat in the upper stands, the same spot, from above, like a chessboard. 2 figures stood on the field. Serin Han, 17 years old, C rank, training sword, perfect stance. Opposite her, Lauren Dane, 21 years old, A rank, two-handed sword, broad shoulders, a confident face, the master's nephew, his finest creation. 4 years of training under the personal guidance of an SS instructor. Lauren looked at Serin without contempt, with interest. He wasn't angry, he was a weapon, finely honed, precisely aimed, and now he was aimed at Serin. The referee gave the signal. Lauren didn't wait. A step forward, a wide swing. The two-handed sword sliced through the air with a hum, powerful, fast. A rank. Serin moved, a step to the left, half a step back. His sword passed 10 centimeters from her shoulder. She didn't attack. Daniel watched from above. She was counting. 1, 2. Lauren attacked again. A series of strikes. Fast. 4 strikes in 2 seconds. Serin blocked the first, dodged the second, parried the third with the flat of her blade. The fourth missed. She was retreating, calmly. Her stance didn't waver. Her breathing was steady. The hall was buzzing. 2 different styles. Lauren is power, speed, pressure. The Da, more mana, faster, stronger, breakthrough. Serin is precision, patience, anticipation. The So method, breathe, watch, wait for your moment. Lauren pressed the attack. 1 minute, 2, 3. Serin was retreating. Not a single strike landed, but she hadn't attacked once either. The hall began to buzz. Someone shouted that the swordswoman was afraid. Daniel sat up above, hands on his knees, calm. He knew what she was doing. She was reading his rhythm, his pauses, his habits, how he shifted his weight, where he looked before striking, how her right foot. She was doing what Daniel had taught her from day one. She was watching. The 4th minute. Lauren attacked for the 5th time. A wide swing from the right, powerful, beautiful. And for a split second, just a split second, his left foot came off the floor. His balance shifted by 2 centimeters, maybe 3. Serin saw it. She stepped forward. 1 punch, a straight, from above, right down the middle, without a grip on the shoulder blade. No 4-centimeter deflection. Straight, clean, right where there was no shield. Lauren took the blow on his forearm. It knocked him back 3 steps. Serin's training sword cracked from the force of the blow. Her own sword, not his. Lauren stood. He shook his hand. His forearm was red through the padding. An S rank had just struck so hard that an A rank was sent flying 3 steps back. The hall fell silent. Dane sat in the front row. Daniel could see him from above. The old man didn't move, but his right hand rested on the armrest, and his fingers were white. The fight continued. Lauren stopped playing around. He became serious, fast, precise. A rank at full power. The difference in strength was real. Serin took a hit. To the side. She staggered. She held her ground. She took a second one. To the shoulder. The right one. The sword slipped from her hand. She caught it with her left. Her stance broke. Her breathing faltered. Lauren saw it. He swung for the final blow. Daniel sat up above. He couldn't help. He couldn't shout. He couldn't come down. Just watched. Serin stood there, one hand, her stance broken, breathless. And she did what no one expected. She closed her eyes. For a second. Inhale, into the lower abdomen, not into the shoulders. One rule, the first thing he taught her. Breathe into your lower abdomen. Exhale. Her eyes opened. Her stance came together. Not the correct one. Off-center. A new one. One she had never trained for. One her body created on its own. Right then and there. From everything Daniel had instilled in her over 2.5 months. Lauren struck. Serin dropped down, into the blow. And from the bottom up, in one motion, knocked his sword from his hands. The Aerang two-handed sword flew out of his grip. It flipped in the air. It plunged into the stone floor 3 meters away. Lauren stood unarmed. Serin stood with the cracked sword in her left hand. The hall was silent. 2,000 people. Silence. The referee didn't stop the fight. Lauren looked at his sword on the floor, then at Serin. Then he raised his hand, on his own. He conceded defeat. A-Rang conceded defeat to S-Rang. The hall erupted. Shouts, noise, the pounding of feet. Journalists jumped to their feet. The instructors stood up. Serin stood on the field, alone, a cracked sword in her left hand. Her right arm hung by her side. Her shoulder ached. She didn't hear the shouts. She looked up. At the farthest bench in the upper tier, where a single man in a gray level 0 robe sat, Daniel was sitting. He was looking at her. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't standing. He was sitting, and he nodded. Once. She nodded back. Then the reporters surrounded her. Questions, cameras, noise. Daniel stood up. He walked toward the exit. He went down the stairs. 9 minutes. The hallway was empty. Everyone was in the hall. He walked down the empty hallway of Haellin Academy, a 0-level instructor, without a gift, without a rank, in a gray robe. And his student had just knocked the sword out of A-Rang's hands. Not with strength, not with magic, with a single breath. The right breath, which he had shown her 2.5 months ago in a basement hall measuring 8 by 10. After sparring with Lauren, So-sensei's name appeared in the news for the first time. Not in Haellin's newspapers, in the continent's news. A small note on the back page. A 0-level instructor trained a swordswoman who disarmed an A rank in 5 minutes. The journalist didn't know what to make of it. A 0-level instructor isn't headline material. It's a joke, but a joke that no one could explain. Tia brought the newspaper to the dining hall. She placed it in front of Daniel. He read the note. 3 lines. His name was misspelled. Daniel So had become Daniel's son. He folded the newspaper, pushed it aside, finished his porridge. Tia asked how he felt. Daniel replied that he felt the porridge was too salty today. Tia snorted, but her eyes were serious. She said that things would be harder now, that attention isn't a gift, that attention is a target on your back. Daniel knew. He had always known. That same week, 3 people came to see him. The first, Leighton Gray from the Heroes Guild. Again. This time, not for Serin, for him, for Daniel. The guild offered him a position as a training consultant, a 3-year contract, a salary 20 times higher than his current one, housing in the central district, access to the guild's training grounds. Daniel listened. He thanked them. He declined. Leighton didn't understand. He asked why. Daniel replied that he had students, that his contract with the academy wasn't over, that he wouldn't abandon his students in the middle of the year. Leighton left, puzzled. The second visitor was a stranger, a short man in dark clothing with no identifying marks. He spoke quietly. He introduced himself as an assistant to a court advisor. He didn't specify whose court. He said that certain people were interested in Daniel's methods, that they were ready to discuss the terms. Daniel asked what terms. The man replied that any terms would do. Daniel asked what would happen if he refused. The man smiled. He said that refusal was also an option, but a less convenient one. He left. Daniel stood in the hallway, a third visitor. No, not a visitor, a note, under the door of the small room. No signature, no seal. 4 words. Be careful, So-sensei. Daniel picked up the note. He looked at it. The handwriting was old, calligraphic. The letters were written like in handwritten books. He folded the note, put it in his pocket. Someone had been watching him for a long time. Someone who wrote in old handwriting. Someone from the academy. He thought about the library, about the basements, about the old books he'd mentioned in the vice principal's office. Then he pushed the thought aside. Now was not the time. Right now he had matters more important than secrets. The 4th month began with a change. Ariana spoke of the rift for the first time. It wasn't Daniel who brought it up. It was her. In the morning after practice. She was sitting on the floor. Her sword lay nearby. She said she hadn't heard their voices in her dreams last night. For the first time in a year. Daniel sat across from her. He listened. She continued. She said that before, she used to hear 4 names every night. Every morning she woke up with them in her mouth, like the taste of blood. She said that yesterday she woke up and it was quiet, and that the silence scared her more than the voices, because silence means she's starting to forget. And to forget means to betray. Daniel was silent, for a long time. Then he answered. He said that forgetting and letting go are 2 different things. That she isn't forgetting them. That she is learning to live alongside their memory, not inside it. That this isn't betrayal, it's survival. And that they wanted her to survive. Ariana looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She said she wanted to try, to approach the rift. Not to go in, just to approach it. Daniel nodded. He said he'd go with her. She shook her head. She said he wouldn't be able to. That even D ranks feel the pressure near the rift. That his body wouldn't hold up. Daniel replied that then he'd stand as far away as necessary. But he'd stand there. Ariana looked at him. For the first time in 4 months, something other than pain appeared in her eyes. Something like gratitude, but deeper, warmer. They went to the rift 2 days later. Not the active one, the training one. The small rift in the academy basement, Class F, safe, for first-year students. Ariana stood in front of the door. Daniel stood 10 meters behind her, further than he wanted, closer than he could. Even at that distance he felt something, a slight pressure, like ringing in his ears, or like a wind that isn't there. Ariana stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her back tense. She didn't move. 1 minute. 2. 3. 5. Daniel stood there, silent. He didn't rush her. He didn't encourage her. He just stood there. In the 7th minute, Ariana raised her hand. She touched the door, with her palm. Her fingers trembled. She pressed her palm against the cold metal. She held it there. 3 seconds. 5. She pulled her hand away, turned around, walked back to Daniel. Her face was pale, her lips were pressed together, but she walked steadily. She didn't run. She walked past him, stopped. Without turning around, she said she'd come back tomorrow. Daniel nodded, though she didn't see him. 10 minutes every day. The door, her palm. 3 seconds. 5. 10. A week later, Ariana kept her hand on the door for 30 seconds. 2 weeks later, she stood with her shoulder pressed against the door. 3 weeks later, she opened the door. 2 centimeters. Something pulled at her from the crack. Not air. Something else. Alien. Ariana slammed the door shut. She stepped back. She was breathing heavily. But she didn't run away. She didn't scream. She stood there, breathing. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6, just as Daniel had taught her. His method, in an S-rank body. It worked the same way, because fear isn't a matter of strength. Fear is a matter of breathing, and the body, and the person standing 10 meters behind you who isn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, Group E7 continued to grow. Serin trained 6 days a week. She rested on the 7th. Daniel insisted on the 7th day. She resisted. He explained about supercompensation, about how muscles grow at rest, about how a rest day isn't a loss, but an investment. She listened, not because she believed him, because she trusted him. Hyun was working on a new spell, not a fireball, a wall of fire. A line of flame he could place in front of the group as a barrier, 3 meters long, 1 meter high. It lasted 4 seconds. Impossible for an E rank, but possible for a D rank who breathes correctly and doesn't waste mana. Maybe. Karo started training his shield attacks. Not just defense, striking with the edge, striking with the flat side, pushing. Karo turned out to be the most inventive. He came up with ways to use the shield that Daniel hadn't even seen in his past life. Ren achieved consistency, 10 out of 10. On the run, from a turn, in mid-jump. His spear became an extension of his arm. Min tied everyone together, 10 seconds, 4 copies. He began experimenting with sequences, fire then shield, or shield then fire. Different orders produced different effects. Yuna had become calm. Not an anxious calm, a genuine one. Her healing glow burned steadily, without flickering. She healed scrapes and cuts with confidence. Not completely, her gift was still weak, but stable. And stability in battle was worth more than strength. At the end of the 4th month, Daniel did something he had never done before. He gathered everyone, not the group, everyone. All 6 students, Tia, Ariana, 9 people in the basement hall. He stood before them. He said that in 2 months, the Academy's annual festival would take place, a major tournament, all streams, all ranks. He said that Group E7 would enter the main bracket, not the consolation bracket, the main one, against D, against C, against B, against A, all the way to the finals. The 5th month, preparing for the festival. Daniel rearranged the schedule. Morning, Ariana and Serin. One-on-one training, swordswoman against swordswoman. Ariana didn't teach Serin techniques. She gave her something no mannequin could provide, a live S-rank opponent. Serin attacked, Ariana dodged. Sometimes she counterattacked. Slowly, at half strength. Even at half strength, Serin couldn't land a hit on an S-rank opponent. But she was learning. Every fight with Ariana taught her more than 100 fights with equals. Because Ariana moved perfectly. And to land even a single blow on a perfect opponent, you have to get closer to perfection yourself. Daniel watched. He corrected both of them. Yes, both of them. Ariana listened too. Her stance was excellent. But even in that, there were small details. Tension in her left wrist. A habit of tucking her chin to the right when dodging. Microscopic things that didn't matter at her level, but which she wanted to correct, because for the first time in a year, she wanted to get better. Not for the guild, not for the world, for herself. In the afternoon, Group E7, team tactics. Daniel added a 4th formation, a trap. Yuna and Min stand in the center, exposed, without cover. Bait. The enemy attacks them. At the moment of the attack, Karo covers the flank. Ren strikes from behind. Hyun erects a wall of fire, cutting off the retreat. Serin finishes them off. Brutal, calculated, effective. The formation demanded courage from Yuna and Min, to stand in the open and wait for the attack. Yuna couldn't do it on the first day. Her hands were shaking. She took a step back. Daniel stopped the training. He walked over to her. He crouched down, to be at eye level. He asked what she was afraid of. Yuna answered quietly. She said she was afraid she wouldn't make it in time, that Karo wouldn't cover her, that she'd be left alone under attack. Daniel turned to Karo. He asked if he would cover Yuna. Karo looked at Yuna, directly, seriously, and said 2 words. He said he would always cover her. Yuna looked at him. At his broad shoulders, at the shield at his hip, at his eyes, in which there was not a shadow of doubt, and she nodded. She stood in the center. Min stood next to her. The team attacked again. This time, Yuna didn't step back. She stood her ground. Karo covered her, just as he promised. That evening, Tia. Her progress amazed even Daniel. In 3 months of training, she had completely reworked her technique. Stance, strike, breathing, movement. She was a different fighter, not a better version of her old self, a new person. Her strikes were 30% faster, 50% more accurate. Her mana consumption had halved. She began breaking the training dummies that she had previously only scratched. Tia came to Daniel's room after one of her training sessions. She sat down on a chair in his tiny room. She was silent for a long time. Then she said she needed a rank review, that she felt B rank was no longer her ceiling. Daniel agreed. Tia looked at him. She asked what he thought, what her ceiling was. Daniel hesitated. Then he replied that he didn't know her ceiling, that he saw the floor, and her floor was currently A. Tia sat there, hands on her knees. A rank. For 12 years, she'd thought she was B, and after 3 months of working with a 0-level instructor, she became A. She didn't say anything. She stood up, walked to the door, stopped, turned around, said that someday he had to tell her who he really was. Daniel replied that he would tell her someday, but not today. Tia nodded. She left. 6th month, 1 week before the festival. Guests arrived at the academy, representatives from neighboring kingdoms, observers, diplomats, and among them were people whom Tia described as quiet, people without insignia, without names, people who stood in the corners and watched, secret services, 3 kingdoms, at least. Everyone wanted to see Group E7 in action. Everyone wanted to understand what a 0-level instructor does. Daniel felt the stares, at every training session, in the dining hall, in the hallways. They were watching him, not hiding, not attacking, just watching, assessing. Tia said that this meant his methodology had become a strategic resource, that if a single instructor without a gift could raise an E rank to C rank in 3 months, then 10 instructors could raise an army in a year. And whoever controls the instructor controls the army. Daniel listened. He understood, and he kept doing what he was doing, because stopping meant giving up. And he didn't know how to give up. 20 years in the gym had taught him one thing: show up. Every day, no matter what. 3 days before the festival, an event occurred that changed everything. Daniel went down to the library, for the first time. He was looking for a textbook on magical theory. He wanted to better understand the ranking system. The library was located in the basements, deep down, below Hall E-7, below the training faults, at the very foundation of the academy. The halls were enormous, floor-to-ceiling shelves, thousands of books, tens of thousands. Old stone, old dust, old light from the crystals on the ceiling, and an old man behind the counter, small, withered, wrinkled, hair as white as paper, brown eyes, alive, too alive for such an old body. He sat behind the desk and looked at Daniel, not as a visitor, as someone he had been waiting for. Daniel stopped, looked at the old man. The old man looked at him. A silence hung between them, heavy, complete. The old man spoke first. His voice was quiet, cracked. He said he was glad to finally meet him, that he had long wanted to see a man with the right hands up close. Daniel didn't understand. He asked what proper hands meant. The old man stood up from behind the desk, slowly. He walked around the table. He stood in front of Daniel. He lifted his hand, skinny, with long fingers, no calluses, turned his palm upward, and said that a coach's hands are different from a fighter's hands. A fighter clenches, a coach guides. A fighter has a fist, a coach has a palm. Daniel has a palm. Daniel stood there, his hand in the old man's. The old man's skin was like parchment, dry, hot. He asked who this man was. The old man answered. He said his name was Elwin, that he was a librarian, that he was 220 years old, and that 200 years ago he had a teacher, the first and only one, a man who knew how to make heroes out of nothing, without the gift, without magic, only with his hands and his voice. His name was the first mentor. He disappeared 200 years ago, and with him, all records of training without the gift vanished. of how people prepared for battle before the Great Awakening. For 200 years, Alvin searched, in this world and others, for a man with the right hands and the right voice, not the strongest, the warmest. Daniel stood in the library, hand in hand with a 220-year-old man, and he listened. Alvin told him how he found him, not in this world, in another. A recording from a judo tournament, a small hall in the suburbs, the child lost. He was crying. The coach sat down beside him. 20 seconds. He didn't say anything special. He was just there. A hand on the shoulder, a steady voice, and the child stopped crying. Not because the pain had gone away, because there was a person nearby who cared. Alvin saw this recording through the interworld mirror, and he recognized it, by the hands, by the voice, by the way the coach touched the child's shoulder. The first mentor had touched him exactly the same way, 200 years ago, the same hands, the same gesture, the same warmth. Alvin pulled Daniel out at the moment of death, caught him between a breath and an exhalation, between the knife and the darkness, placed him in the body of an instructor zero who had drunk himself to death in the dormitory, and waited. 3 months, watched, from the library, from the basement. The note under the door was from him. Daniel listened. His face didn't change, his hands didn't tremble. He stood and listened as the old man told him that his death wasn't the end, that his life wasn't a coincidence, that 20 years in a small hall in the suburbs of Seattle had been preparation for this, for Illyria, for the 6 children in the basement hall, for a world that had forgotten how to train people. When Alvin finished, Daniel was silent, for a long time, a minute, 2. Then he asked one thing. He asked if that boy was alive, at the bus stop, the one for whom he had approached the 3 men with a knife. Alvin nodded. He said he was alive, that he had run away, that he had made it. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time in this world, for the first time in 6 months in a foreign body, the first time since his death and rebirth, tears streamed down his face, silently, without sobbing, just water from his closed eyes. He stood in the library, in the academy's basement, in a gray, zero-level robe, and he cried because the boy had made it. The Haellin Academy Festival was held once a year, the main arena, 20,000 seats. In the stands, the king, the council, the Heroes Guild, ambassadors from the 4 kingdoms, generals, aristocrats, journalists from across the continent, and quiet, nameless people in the corners. Exhibition matches from every class, the finale of the year, the culmination of every instructor's work, every group's, every student's. Fates were decided here. Names were born here. Daniel stood at the entrance to the backstage area, a gray robe, level 0. The guard at the door looked at his patch and didn't want to let him in. Level 0 had no access to the backstage areas. Daniel stood there, calmly, waiting. A minute later, Tia approached. She said her B-rank pass. She said he was with her. The guard let him through. It was noisy in the under the stands room. Groups were warming up. Instructors were giving final instructions. Daniel found his group in the far corner. They stood together, 6 of them. Uniforms clean, weapons ready. Their faces were serious, but not frightened. Ariana was standing nearby, in civilian clothes, without a sword. She hadn't come as a fighter, as a spectator, like someone who just wanted to be there. Daniel stood in front of the group. He looked at each one. Serin, Hyunu, Karo, Ren, Min, Yuna. 6 months, 180 days, every single day, no absences. He knew each of them better than he knew himself. He knew how Serin breathed before a strike. He knew that Hyun rubbed his wrist when he was nervous. He knew that Karo clenched his jaw when he was ready. He knew that Ren closed his eyes for a second before the first strike. He knew that Min moved closer to Karo when she was afraid. He knew that Yuna pressed her notebook to her chest when she was nervous. He didn't give a speech. He didn't try to motivate them. He walked over to Serin. He adjusted her collar. He placed his hand on her shoulder, right where it used to be clenched. Her shoulder blade was free. 6 months, quietly, so no one would hear. He said 4 words. He said he remembered the first mannequin. Serin nodded. She didn't turn around. Daniel removed his hand. He stepped back. He looked at the others. He said 1 word. Let's get to work. Draw. 32 groups. 5 rounds to the final. E7 in the bottom half of the bracket. First round. D2. Victory in 3 minutes. Wedge. Wave. Clean. Second round. C4. Victory in 5 minutes. Trap. Yuna and Min in the center. Karo blocked. Ren struck. Serin finished it off. The hall erupted. Third round. B6. Things got tough here. B rank is serious. Stronger, faster, more experienced. The fight lasted 10 minutes. Min was eliminated in the 3rd. Ren in the 5th. Karo held his ground. Hyunwoo was on fire. Yuna healed. Serin slashed. In the 9th minute, Hyunwoo put up a wall of fire, 3 meters wide, 1 meter high. It's the 3 B ranks from the rest. Serin stepped behind the wall. 1 against 3. 3 strikes, 3 seconds. 3 B ranks behind the line. Victory. The arena was on its feet, 20,000 people standing. 4th round, semifinals, A2. 6 A ranks, a wall, a real wall. The fight lasted 12 minutes. E7 lost Yuna, Mina, Rina, Karo. 4 were eliminated in 8 minutes. 2 remained, Hyunwoo and Serin, against 4 A ranks. Hyunwoo stood behind Serin. He erected walls of fire, one after another. Mana was running low, each wall weaker than the last. Serin moved within the fire, between the walls, like in a maze Hyunwoo had built for her. 2 people, 1 mind. They didn't speak, didn't count. They knew. 6 months together, every day. They knew where the other stood, where they would move, when they would strike. Serin knocked out 2. Hyun knocked out 1 with fire. The 4th A rank stood alone, against 2. He raised his hand, admitted defeat. The arena roared. 20,000 voices. The final. Group A1. The Academy's best group, Master Dane's students, led by Lauren Dane, the very one, whom Serin had disarmed 3 months ago. He stood on his side of the field, a 2-handed sword behind his back, his face calm, no malice, no resentment, respectfully. He nodded to Serin across the field. She nodded back. Dane sat in the front row, next to the king, gray eyes on the field, motionless, stone-faced. Daniel stood by the wall, far away, in a gray robe, looking down. A chessboard, the final game. The referee gave the signal. A 1 moved forward, quickly, powerfully, organized. Dane had trained them his own way, roughly, through pain, through exhaustion, but he trained them well. They were strong, every one of them, individually stronger than any of the E7s. The battle began. A wedge, Serin in front, Karo on the right, Ren on the left, Hyun behind Serin, Min behind Karo, Yuna in the rear, against 6 A ranks, strength against technique, power against coordination, Dane's method against So's method. The fight lasted 20 minutes. Every minute counted. Karo went down in the 5th. He took a blow that was meant for Yuna. He shielded her, just as he promised. Min was eliminated in the 8th round. He held his copy until the very last second. Ren in the 10th. 3 hits out of 3 before he was knocked out. Hyunwoo in the 15th. His final wall of fire was the largest, 5 meters wide, 1.5 meters high. It split the field in half, and behind it remained Serin and Yuna, 2 girls, S rank and E+, against 4 A ranks. Yuna stood behind Serin. She didn't count. She didn't heal. She just stood there, holding the glow, an even green glow on her palms. It didn't heal. It shone. And in that light, Serin could see the shadows of their opponents through the wall of fire. Min had taught Yuna this. It was his idea. To use the healer's glow as a spotlight. Daniel had approved. Hyun poured all his remaining mana into the wall. It burned brightly. 20 seconds. Enough. The wall went out. 4 A ranks moved forward. Lauren first. Serin stepped forward to meet him. She knew him, his rhythm, his pauses, his left foot that swings out in a wide arc. 3 months ago, she knocked his sword out of his hand. He remembered. She remembered. Lauren struck, quickly, precise. Not like last time. Better. He'd been training. Serin stepped back. Counterattack. Lauren blocked. His foot stayed in place. He corrected his mistake. Daniel watched from above. Dane taught. In his own way, but he taught. Lauren had improved. The fight between them was beautiful. 2 swords, 2 styles, 2 schools. 5 minutes. Serin took a blow to the thigh. She staggered. Yuna ran up. A glow. A second. The pain was gone. Not completely, but enough. Yuna ran away. The other 3 A ranks attacked her. The little one. The round-faced one. The E+ healer. She stood there. Didn't run away. Didn't scream. Just stood and looked at them. With the same calmness Daniel had been building for 6 months. The referee stopped the attack on her. Yuna was out. Serin was left alone, against 4, again, just like back then at the internal tournament against the C ranks. Only now they were A ranks. The hall fell silent. 20,000. The king in the stands. Dane in the front row. Daniel by the wall. Serin stood. Stance. Left foot back. Knee bent. Weight on the front third of the foot. Shoulder blade free. Sword in front of her. 6 months in this stance. Every day. 400 strikes. She closed her eyes. Inhale into her belly. Exhale. Opened them. Lauren attacked. She dodged. The second A rank struck. She blocked. The third. She dodged. The fourth. She parried with her sword. 4 strikes. 4 responses. One after another. Without pause. Without faltering. She moved the way no C rank ever moved. She moved like an A rank. No. Better. Because an A rank relies on strength. She relied on precision. On timing. On the fractions of a second between strikes. On those 4 centimeters that 6 months ago had veered to the right, but now went straight down the center. 1 minute. 2. 3. She knocked one out. Lauren counterattacked. Hard. Accurate. She took the blow. Held her ground. Returned it. She knocked out the second one. 2 remained. Lauren and 1 more. They stood facing each other, breathing heavily. Serin breathed evenly. In for 4. Out for 6. Just as Daniel had taught her. Just as she did every day. Hundreds of times. Thousands. Lauren looked at her and smiled. He attacked. One last time. Wide. Powerful. With the full force of an A rank. Serin didn't move away. Didn't dodge. She stepped toward him. Into his strike. Right where no one expects an opponent. Her sword passed by his blade. Under his arm. And stopped at his throat. The training blade a centimeter from his neck. Lauren froze. His sword hung in the air. The strike unfinished. He looked down. At the blade at his throat. Then at Serin. And lowered his sword. The last A rank raised his hand. Victory. Group E7 had won the final of the Haellin Academy's annual festival. The hall fell silent. For a second. 2. Then it erupted. 20,000 voices. Shouts, stomping, a roar. Journalists rushed toward the field. The king stood on the podium. Standing beside him were the members of the council. Daniel stood by the wall, in a gray robe, watching. Serin stood on the field, alone, sword in hand. Around her, the roar and the light. She couldn't hear it. She turned, toward her group. The 5 of them stood at the edge of the field, battered, exhausted, alive. Karo with a bruise across half her cheek, Min with scraped knees, Ren with a torn sleeve, Hyun with burned fingers, Yuna with a green glow on her palms that she'd forgotten to extinguish. Serin walked over to them, stood beside them. All 6 turned, toward the farthest, highest stand, to where a single man stood in a gray robe, and they bowed, exactly 15 degrees, simultaneously. 6 bows, 1 angle, 1 movement. The hall saw it. 20,000 people saw 6 children bowing, not to the king, not to the council, not to the guild, to the man in the gray robe on the upper balcony. The king stood, Behind him, the council. Behind them, the stands. One after another, 20,000 people rose and bowed in return. Up there, up high, to the level 0 instructor. Daniel stood. He looked down, at the 6, at the bow, at the 20,000 people bowing to him, a coach from the Seattle suburbs, a man without a gift, without rank, without magic. His shoulders trembled. He lowered his head. Serin saw it. She rose from her bow, stepped forward, positioned herself to shield him from the cameras, so no one would see. Because some things belong only to the coach and the student, to no one else. After the festival, the world changed. Not for Daniel, for the world. The name So-sensei was no longer a footnote on the back page. It became a headline. Every newspaper on the continent, every information crystal, every guild bulletin, a 0-level instructor, without a gift, without a rank. He raised the team that defeated the Academy's best students in 6 months, from E rank. The world couldn't explain it, and so the world tried to claim it. Daniel spent the first week after the festival in endless meetings. The Heroes Guild, an official invitation, not a consultant, director of the training program. The Academy Council, an offer for the position of senior instructor, with rank by position, not by power, by position. The Embassy of the Western Kingdom, an invitation to the capital, a contract to establish a training center. The Eastern Embassy, the same. The Southern Embassy, the same. Quiet, nameless people. A private conversation, in a windowless room, with an offer that sounded like a compliment but like a threat. Daniel listened to everyone. He thanked them. He refused. Everyone, all of them, without exception. He said the same thing every time. He has students. He has a contract with the Academy. He has a job. Everything else would have to wait. By the second week, the pressure had intensified. The headmistress summoned him. She closed the door. She spoke quietly. She said that the Academy Council was divided. One faction wanted to promote him and provide resources. Another wanted to isolate his methods under a veil of secrecy. A third wanted him to leave. Quietly. No drama. She said she was on his side, but that she was the principal, not the queen, and that the pressure from above was mounting. Daniel thanked her. He asked how much time he had. She replied that she didn't know. Maybe a month, maybe less. Daniel returned to his little room. He sat down at the table. A stack of papers lay before him. 6 notebooks, scribbled to the brim. He took a blank sheet of paper and began to write. Not a training plan. Not notes on students. A methodology. The first textbook in Illyria on coaching without the gift. He wrote all night. Stance, breathing, biomechanics, periodization of training loads, the psychology of working with a student, recovery, sleep, nutrition, team coordination, everything he knew, everything he'd done for 20 years in a small gym in the Seattle suburbs, translated into the Illyrian language, adapted, systematized. By morning he had 30 pages, the foundation, the beginning. He knew he wouldn't be able to finish it alone. He needed help. He called Tia and Hyun. Tia because she understood the method as a system. Hyun because Daniel saw in him not a fighter, a coach. From the very first month, he told them both, told them he might be taken out, that the pressure was too intense, that one person with a method is a target, but 10 people with a method is a movement. 100 people with a method is a revolution. A revolution cannot be taken out. It cannot be classified. It can't be bought. It can only be accepted. He laid 30 pages in front of them, said this was the beginning of the textbook, that Tia would finish writing it, that Hyun would review it, that together they must do what Daniel alone could not, pass on the knowledge, not to a single student, to hundreds, to thousands. Tia took the pages. She read, silently. Hyun sat beside her. He looked at his sensei. Daniel looked at him. He said that Hyun would be the first student instructor. Not a fighter, a coach, a person who teaches others to teach. Hyun asked why him. Daniel answered. He said that Hyun had always been second best, that he thought Hyun-woo had no purpose, that Hyun-woo's purpose wasn't in the fire. Hyun-woo's purpose was to one day stand before a group of children, just as lost as they had been, and to say to them the same words Daniel had said. Breathe. Stand straight. You are not hopeless. Hyunwoo sat there, hands on his knees. He didn't touch his wrist. He wasn't nervous. He looked at Daniel and nodded. Once, heavily, like Karo, like a man who takes on the weight and knows he can bear it. A week later, Daniel opened a zero-level room at the academy, a separate room, not a basement, a former storage room on the first floor. Tia got permission through the headmistress, a small room, but with windows, with new mannequins, with a clean floor. Daniel hung a sign on the door, Zero Hall, open to all. 3 came on the first day, kids who'd been kicked out from everywhere, F ranks, the weakest, the most lost. Daniel stood before them, looked at each one, saw their slumped shoulders, eyes on the floor, hands at their sides. He recognized them, smiled, to himself, and he said what he always said. He said they weren't hopeless, that he saw each of them, that he saw, and not a single one of them was hopeless. He started with breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Hyun stood nearby, watching, learning to teach. Ariana came to him that evening, not into the hall, into the small room, for the first time. She stood in the doorway, tall, blonde, in simple clothes, without a sword. She said she had opened the door to the rift, not by 2 centimeters, completely. She stood on the threshold, 30 seconds. She looked inside. She didn't come in, but she stood there, and she didn't hear any voices. Daniel was sitting on the bed, listening. She continued. She said she wanted to try to go in, but not alone. She asked him to stand next to her, not 10 meters away, right next to her. Daniel replied that his body wouldn't withstand the pressure next to the rift. Ariana looked at him. She said she was S rank, that she could maintain a shield around him, that his only task was to stand there, and if she stopped at the threshold, if she couldn't take a step, to say the one thing that could make her move. Daniel asked what that was. Ariana answered. She said he knew it himself, that he always knew what to say, at the right moment, to the right person, that this was his gift, the only true gift in a world without gifts. Daniel was silent. Then he nodded. He said he would go with her. The S-rank rift opened over the capital at dawn. The sky cracked. A black line stretched from horizon to horizon. Light poured out of the crack, not sunlight, dead, gray, cold. The distorted ones poured out immediately, hundreds, thousands. Creatures the world hadn't seen in decades, S-rank, every single one. The Academy's sirens wailed, the guild sirens, the city's sirens. Haellin was waking up to a nightmare. All the SS heroes on the continent had been summoned to the capital. 20 people, 20 demigods. They stood along the perimeter of the rift, holding the line. But the rift was widening. There were too many distorted ones, and they were too strong. The curve, that very one. Humanity is losing according to schedule. Today, the schedule became reality. Serin. 2 steps to the left. Serin stepped forward, without asking, without looking back. 2 steps to the left. She stood. The twisted broke through the SS heroes' line on the right. They poured into the city. Serin found herself right in their path, alone, with a sword. She struck. The first twisted crumbled, the second, the third. She moved like the wind. No, like a metronome. Steady, precise, no wasted motion. Every strike to the center, every breath into the abdomen, every step on the front third of the foot. 6 months of training in every strike. Hyun, breathe. Hyunwoo stood below, before the group of distorted ones who had broken through to the residential districts. His wall of fire stood across the street, 5 meters wide, 2 meters high, solid, hot. The distorted ones slowed down. Hyunwoo breathed. Inhale, fire. Exhale, calm. Steady chi, just as Sensei had taught him. He had enough mana for 3 walls, maybe 4. He didn't waste any. Every breath counted. Karo, hold Yuna. Karo stood in front of Yuna, shield against his body, elbow to his ribs, center of gravity low. A distorted one struck the shield. Karo stood. A second struck. He stood. A third. He stood. He had promised, I'll always block. And he stood. Behind him, Yuna was healing a wounded civilian. A green glow, steady, no flickering, no fear. A 16-year-old girl who, 6 months ago, couldn't show her gift in front of people. Now she was healing a stranger under the blows of the distorted, calmly, focused, breathing as Sensei had taught her. Min, Link. Min ran between the groups, copying. Hyun's fire, Karo's shield, Yuna's glow. Weak copies, 10%. But in the right place, at the right moment. He placed a copy of the shield where Karo wasn't, placed a copy of the fire where Hyun wasn't, filled the gaps, bound the 5 into a single whole, the 6th, the one who made 5 into 6. Daniel stood on the roof. He spoke, quietly, steadily. Every word weighed, every command one action, short, precise. He saw the field from above, like a chessboard, 6 pieces, his pieces, 6 kids who, 6 months ago, had stood in a crooked line in the basement hall and didn't believe they were worth anything. Now they stood between the rift and the city, and held their ground. Ariana remained. She stood before the rift, unmoving, 20 meters. The S-heroes on either side were retreating. The line was cracking. Someone was needed to go inside, to seal the rift from within. An S-rank was needed, at least. Ariana was an S-rank, the only one available. The rest were holding the perimeter. She stood there, staring at the rift, at the door, at the threshold, that very one. Daniel saw her from the roof, a small figure in the golden light of the rift, motionless. He raised the crystal to his lips, quietly, so quietly that even Tia standing nearby didn't hear. 20 minutes, the longest of Daniel's life. He stood on the roof, stared at the crack, waiting. Tia stood beside him, silent. The city was burning. His students were fighting below. Serin was cutting down the twisted on the approaches to the academy. Hyun was putting up walls. Karo was holding Yuna. Ren was striking from the rooftops. Min was tying them up. They were holding their ground, the 6 of them, D ranks and 1 E+, against S-rank distorted ones. They held them back because they weren't 6 individuals. They were a team. 1 body, 1 breath. 20 minutes. The crack trembled. It contracted. The light flickered and went out. The rift closed, instantly, like a door slamming shut. The distorted on the ground crumbled, all at once. Thousands of creatures turned to dust. The city froze. Silence. Then, from the place where the rift had been, Ariana emerged. Unharmed, alive, sword in hand, a blue glow, her face wet with tears. But her eyes were clear. For the first time in a year, she stood there. She looked up at the sky, the whole sky, without a crack, and she breathed, steadily. Inhale for 4. Exhale for 6. Daniel sank to his knees, right on the roof. His legs wouldn't hold him. His body was giving out. 6 hours on his feet, in the cold, in the wind. It was too much for this body. Tia caught him, held him by the shoulders. He sat on his knees, looking down, at the city, at his students, at Ariana, at the world that had just not ended, and that hadn't ended because 6 children knew how to breathe correctly, and because 1 woman heard 6 words and was able to take a step. Then came days, weeks, months. Daniel didn't remember them individually. They merged into one long, steady stream of work. The method was finished. Tia finished writing it. Hyun checked it. Elwin from the library helped with historical references. The textbook was published on thin paper with a simple cover. No gold embossing, no flashy title. The So method, training of body and spirit. Daniel placed the first copy on the headmistress's desk. He gave the second to Tia, the third to Hyun. He sent the 4th to the Western Kingdom, with a student. Tia went herself. She opened the first So school outside of Haellin. She managed, without him. Because the method worked, not because Daniel was a genius. The method worked because it was right. Any trainer could apply it. That was its strength. And that was the fear. The authorities were afraid. You can't control the mass production of heroes. But that was exactly what saved the world. The mass production of people who knew how to breathe, stand, fight, work together. A year passed. 2, 3. Serin reached SS rank, the first in 10 years. When asked by reporters how she'd managed it, she answered with 4 words. She said she'd simply stood by his side. The reporters didn't understand. She didn't explain. Ariana returned to duty. A new team, 6 people, all from the 0 rank hall, all former outcasts, all trained using the So method. Hyun opened his own school, a small one, in the suburbs of Haellin. He taught children, F ranks, those whom everyone had written off. Karo became an instructor at the academy, B rank. He wore his uniform neatly, every button buttoned. Ren went into the guild's intelligence unit, quiet, precise, 10 out of 10. Min became a liaison, a coordinator. He linked teams on the battlefield. His echo had grown to 30 seconds. He could copy 6 gifs in a row. Yuna became a field medic, the best in Haellin. Her glow was still faint, but steady. And in a field hospital, stability saved more lives than power. Magister Dane retired, quietly, without fanfare. The last thing he did was come to the 0 hall. He stood by the door. He watched as Daniel taught 3 F ranks how to breathe. He stood there for 10 minutes. Then he turned and left. The next day, his office was empty. A note lay on the desk. 1 line. Maybe I was wrong. Daniel found the note a week later. He read it, folded it, put it away. He didn't show it to anyone. Daniel So didn't become a hero. He didn't become a legend. He didn't become a general. He remained a 0-level instructor, a gray robe. That very one, worn out, with an emblem that had long since faded. They offered him a gold one. He refused. They offered him an office on the top floor. He stayed in the cubbyhole on the 4th. Now he climbed the stairs in 4 minutes, without getting out of breath. His body had grown sturdier, not strong, resilient, sufficient. To stand in the hall for 6 hours, to climb the stairs, to live. In the evenings he sat in the 0-level hall, alone. When everyone had left, the lights off, only the moon through the window. Training slippers stood by the door, different sizes, 6 pairs, those very ones, the first ones, worn out. Not a single pair had outgrown him. He didn't buy new ones, because they weren't just slippers, they were a memory of 6 children who stood in a crooked line in the basement and didn't believe they were worth anything. Daniel sat on the floor, back to the wall. He looked at those slippers and breathed, evenly. Inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 6. A quiet room, warm floor, the smell of wood and sweat. A small room, just like that one, in the suburbs of Seattle, where it all began, where it always begins, not with magic, not with power, not with rank, with the person standing next to you who says, you can do it, and with the person who believes and acts.